Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How is everybody today? How is everybody this afternoon, this evening, wherever it is you are watching from, coming from, in your day? This is Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. So, welcome back, welcome to. However, it is you are coming to this channel. It is a new day. It is a new breath of air. So, I would just like to tell you a little bit about what this is. I just want to remind everybody or let everybody know that, again, I am not an expert, nor do I specialize in any type of educational specialty, or I do not have any expertise in any area of law, education, anything. I do have a college degree. I do have a career. I do have been working in a specific field for a number of years, but I do not claim to be an expert in anything. I am simply on here to watch content and give my feedback, give my opinions, give my critical and bias judgment as unedited as possible. So yeah, so far I have just been specifically on trials, just because that's my little area of interest at the moment. And yeah, they're a little bit older just because they're trials that I didn't watch when they were happening. And then I went back and found some interesting tidbits to kind of they sparked my interest. So I wanted to go back and watch the proceedings and things. So, like I said, this is just me and what I find interesting and my comments on it and things like that. So, today we are going to start day one with the Chandler Halderson trial. Now, not sure how many people have heard of it, haven't heard of it. Personally, I had not heard of it till just in passing and just little tidbits of it. So we're going to go through it from start to finish. And I would like to just kind of go through it as the trial goes and not really look ahead. So kind of want to be in the seats as see it how the jury would see it as far as testimony and stuff like that. So I'm going to try my hardest not to Google things. So I'm going to try. But I don't even think I really know the outcome. So, I mean, I think I do, but I'm not sure that I do. So, in that case, I'm going to go with I don't know fully what the outcome was. I definitely don't know all of the facts. So, we are going to go through and start with day one. And this is day one with jury instructions, and then it gets into opening statements from the state, and then defense, and then it gets into testimony. And haven't even looked to see really how long it was. I just wanted to get rolling on to the next thing since I finished up the George Zimmerman trial stuff that I was doing. So I wanted to get into something new. And so the George Zimmerman trial was 10 years ago. This one is 10 months ago. So it's a little bit newer. So that, people might be a little bit more familiar with it. I don't think that there was much news coverage on it. I don't think that there was much. I mean, clearly I didn't know anything about it. So it was also in Wisconsin. So I don't know what this is about Wisconsin, but they've got some really messed up people in Wisconsin. So, but okay, we will go ahead and get started.
Evidence given in court. If so, please say I do.
Please be seated, everyone.
This is just jury instructions. Probably got his little bow tie.
Let me inquire, Mr. Burkhardt, is the system working well for you? Excellent, excellent. Folks, thank you very much for getting here this morning. I need to ask you whether or not any member of the jury panel was exposed to any information between 4 o'clock yesterday when I last saw you and this moment, whether you engaged in conversations with others, with each other, or sought intentionally or were unintentionally exposed to any information about the case. If so, raise your hand. Mr. Burkhardt.
Yeah, I got soup and it's Campbell's soup. Wasn't there Campbell on the list?
It is possibly a name that I read yesterday. There were a lot that I don't remember, but other than that, we're good. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't see any other hands. The first thing we do this morning, folks, is provide you with preliminary jury instructions. We have, frankly, instructions for almost everything to help explain the law to the jury and to give guidance. And that's the intent of these. They first start out giving you some firm, concrete reinforcement of what I've already told you about what you need to do in this process and how this process will proceed. There are then standard instructions about evidence and about your role and what you should and should not expect as far as evidence in this case. And then a substantive instruction on each of the counts, describing to you the elements that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt and how to interpret some of those terms, including finally the meaning of reasonable doubt, the presumption of innocence, etc. Now, for purposes of this preliminary instruction, I did combine the counts in the information so that I'm not reading all 8, but I'm reading 4 with a reference in each to the count regarding Bart Halderson and the count regarding Krista Halderson, simply to save time. And because you're not reaching determinations today, you don't reach any determinations until we send you to the jury room for that purpose. But just to save time, because the elements are the same, whether it's...
Oh, FYI, Chandler Halderson is on trial for the murder of his parents, Bart and Krista Halderson. That's what this is. He's being accused and charged with, I don't know what count, you'll hear here in a second of what, but that's what it is. He did some pretty, allegedly at this point, pretty horrific things to his mommy and daddy. But yeah, that's the basis of what it is. Okay.
Whether it's the first count or the 5th count. Before the trial begins, there are certain instructions you should have to better understand your functions as a juror and how you should conduct yourself during the trial. Your duty is to decide the case based only on the evidence presented at trial and the law given to you by the court. Anything you may see or hear outside the courtroom is not evidence. Do not let any personal feeling about race, religion, national origin, sex, or age affect your consideration of the evidence. Do not begin your deliberations and discussion of the case until all the evidence is presented and I have instructed you on the law. Do not discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else until your final deliberations in the jury room. We will stop or recess from time to time during the trial. You may be excused from the courtroom when it is necessary for me to hear legal arguments from the lawyers. If you come into contact with the parties, lawyers, or witnesses, do not speak with them. For their part, the parties, lawyers, and witnesses will not contact or speak with the jurors. Do not listen to any conversation about this case. Do not research any information that you personally think might be helpful to you in understanding the issues presented. Do not investigate this case on your own or visit the scene. Do not read any newspaper reports or listen to any news reports on radio or television or electronic devices about this trial. Do not consult dictionaries and computers, websites, or other reference materials for additional information. Do not seek information regarding the public records of any party or witness in this case. Any information you obtain outside the courtroom could be misleading, inaccurate, or incomplete. Relying on this information is unfair because the parties would not have the opportunity to refute, explain, or correct it. Do not communicate with anyone about this trial or your experience as a juror while you are serving on this jury. Do not use a computer, cell phone, or other electronic device with communication capabilities to share any information about this case. For example, do not communicate by blog, email, text message, Twitter, or in any other way on or off the computer about this case until after you are discharged from your duties. Do not permit anyone to communicate with you. And if anyone does so, despite your telling them not to, you should report that to me. I appreciate that it is tempting when you go home in the evening to discuss this case with another member of your household, but you may not do so. This case must be decided by you, the jurors, based on the evidence presented in the courtroom. People not serving on this jury have not heard the evidence, and it is improper for them to influence your deliberations and discussion and decision in this case. After this trial is completed, you are free to communicate with anyone in any manner. These rules are intended to ensure that jurors remain impartial throughout the trial. If any juror has reason to believe that another juror has violated these rules, you should report that to me. If jurors do not comply with these rules, it could result in a new trial involving additional time and significant expense to the parties and the taxpayers. You are to decide this case solely on the evidence offered and received at trial. Evidence is, first, the sworn testimony of witnesses, both on direct and cross-examination, regardless of who called the witness. Second, the exhibits the court has received, whether or not an exhibit goes to the jury room. And third, any fact to which the lawyers have agreed or stipulated, or which the court has directed you to find. Attorneys for each side have the right and the duty to object to what they consider are improper questions asked of witnesses and to the admission of other evidence, which they believe is not properly admissible. You should not draw any conclusions from the fact that an objection was made. By allowing testimony or other evidence to be received over the objection of counsel, the court is not indicating any opinion about the evidence. You, jurors, are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight of the evidence.
Yes, you are.
You are not required to, but you may take notes during this trial, except during opening statements and closing arguments. The court will provide you with materials. In taking notes, you must be careful that it does not distract you from carefully listening to and observing the witnesses. You may rely on your notes to refresh your memory during your deliberations. Otherwise, keep them confidential. After the trial, the notes will be collected and destroyed. You will not have a copy of the written transcript of the trial testimony available for use during deliberations. You should pay careful attention to all the testimony because you must rely primarily on your memory of the evidence and testimony introduced during the trial. During the course of a trial, the attorneys may refer to or use police reports with witnesses. Normally, these police reports will not be provided to you. If you are not provided with a police report, you should use your collective memory regarding any reference to police reports. It is the duty of the jury to scrutinize and to weigh the testimony of witnesses and to determine the effect of the evidence as a whole. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is, the believability of the witnesses and of the weight to be given to their testimony. In determining the credibility of each witness and the weight you give to the testimony of each witness, consider these factors. Whether the witness has an interest or lack of interest in the result of this trial, the witness's conduct, appearance, and demeanor on the witness stand, the clearness or lack of clearness of the witness's recollections, the opportunity the witness had for observing and for knowing the matters the witness testified about, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony, the apparent intelligence of the witness, bias or prejudice, if any, has been shown, possible motives for falsifying testimony, and all other facts and circumstances during the trial which tend either to support or to discredit the testimony. Then give to the testimony of each witness the weight you believe it should receive. There's no magic way for you to evaluate the testimony. Instead, you should use your common sense and experience. In everyday life, you determine for yourselves the reliability of things people say to you. You should do the same thing here. An information is nothing more than a written formal accusation against a defendant charging the commission of one or more criminal acts. You are not to consider it as evidence against the defendant in any way. It does not raise any inference of guilt. Count 1 and Count 5 of the amended information each allege that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did, as to Count 1, cause the death of Bart A. Halderson with intent to kill that person, and as to Count 5, cause the death of Krista R. Halderson with intent to kill that person, both contrary to WISSTAT Section 940.01, Sum 1, Sum A. To these two charges, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of each offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. First-degree intentional homicide, as defined in Section 940.01 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin, is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. Before you may find the defendant guilty of either of these offenses, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present for each count. Number one, the defendant caused the death of Bart A. Halderson and, as to the second charge, caused the death of Krista R. Halderson. Cause means that the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. Element 2, the defendant acted with the intent to kill Bart A. Halderson and, as to the second charge, acted with intent to kill Krista R. Halderson. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. While the law requires that the defendant acted with intent to kill, it does not require that the intent exist for any particular length of time before the act is committed. The act need not be brooded over, considered, or reflected upon for a week, a day, an hour, or even a minute. There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant before the act, and must continue to exist at the time of the act. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent to kill must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. Intent should not be confused with motive. While proof of intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of a defendant in order to convict. Evidence of motive does not by itself establish guilt. You should give it the weight you believe it deserves under all the circumstances.
They all need to prove
If you are satisfied
motive,
beyond a reasonable
but they
doubt
have
that the defendant, as to the first count, caused the death of Bart A. Halderson, and as to the second count, the fifth count, caused the death of Krista R. Halderson, with, as to each count, the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 2 and Count 6 of the information each allege that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did deliver written and or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the defendant had knowledge of the whereabouts or physical condition of a missing person, Bart A. Halderson as to Count 2 and Krista R. Halderson as to Count 6, both contrary to WISSTAT Section 946.48, sub 1. To these two charges, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of each offense beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 946.48 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who sends, delivers, and or causes to be transmitted to another any written or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the sender has knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person. Before you may find the defendant guilty of either of these offenses, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present for each count. Number one, the defendant sent, delivered, or caused to be transmitted a written or oral communication to Dane County Sheriff's deputies. Element 2, the defendant did so with the intent to induce a false belief that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson as to Count 2 and Krista R. Halderson as to Count 6. This means that the defendant had the mental purpose to cause the Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson and Krista R. Halderson, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, again, specifically Bart A. Halderson and Krista R. Halderson. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the two elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 3 and Count 7 of the information each allege that the above named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did, as to count 3, dismember the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, and as to count 7, dismember the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, both contrary to Wistat section 940.11, sub 1. To these 2 charges, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of each offense charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11, sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who mutilates, disfigures, or dismembers a corpse with intent to conceal a crime.
So far, he is being charged with first-degree murder in the death of his mom and dad. He is charged with something to the effect of giving false reports to indicate he knew where somebody was when he didn't know, or not knowing where somebody was when he did know. And then he dismembered the bodies. He did things to the bodies. He's being charged with doing not good things.
Or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of each of these offenses, or either of these offenses, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following 2 elements were present for each count. Element 1, the defendant dismembered a corpse. Element 2, the defendant dismembered a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 4 and count 8 of the information each allege that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did, as to count 1, hide the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, and as to count 8, hide the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, both contrary to Wistat section 940.11, sub 1. To these 2 charges, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11, sub 2 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who hides or buries a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of either of these offenses, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following 2 elements were present for each count. Element 1, the defendant hid a corpse. Element 2, the defendant hid a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of these offenses have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. In reaching your verdicts, examine the evidence with care and caution. Act with judgment, reason, and prudence. Defendants are not required to prove their innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty, unless, in your deliberations, you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The burden of establishing every fact necessary to constitute guilt is upon the state. Before you can return a verdict of guilty, the evidence must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. If you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, you should do so and return a verdict of not guilty. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. It means such a doubt as would cause which would cause a person of ordinary prudence to pause or hesitate when called upon to act in the most important affairs of life. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based on mere guesswork or speculation. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. While it is your duty to give the defendant the benefit of every reasonable doubt, you are not to search for doubt. You are to decide whether the state has overcome the presumption of the defendant's innocence and proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The lawyers will now make opening statements. The purpose of an opening statement is to give the lawyers an opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence will show so that you will better understand the evidence as it is introduced during the trial. I must caution you, however, that the opening statements are not evidence. Attorney Brown.
Thank you.
Not evidence.
That the opening statements are not evidence.
Oh,
Attorney Brown.
Thank you.
moved right on.
The screen turned on, Judge, on the left HDMI. While he's doing that, I'll promise you he'll give you a copy of that, by the way. You don't have to remember all of those instructions. My name is William Brown. I'm the Deputy District Attorney, Dane County. Yesterday, you met Andrew and Raymond. Together, we're the prosecutors. You heard a little bit about how the process worked in jury selection, and you probably thought you were being strung along the whole time, and in a bit you were. Everyone was trying to gauge your knowledge of the case, maybe any preconceived notions you had about the criminal justice system. Ms. Vera asked you a lot of questions about what you would think if she did nothing and sat there, and those were good questions. I won't do nothing in this case because it would be a very short trial if I did. You're going to hear from me, Ms. Raymond, quite a bit. Our job in a case is to present evidence. That means to call witnesses. The judge talked about what evidence is. When we think of evidence, sometimes we think of, especially a murder case. You're in a murder case. You think of the gun. And you'll get that. There'll be a gun. You'll see that. But evidence is so much more. The first thing evidence is the first thing the judge mentioned. Evidence is first the
Doesn't
sworn
sound like
testimony
he's
of
from
witnesses,
Wisconsin.
both on direct and cross-examination. When people
Never
raise
been
their
the
right hand
judge.
and they swear to tell the truth, that's evidence. Now, you as jurors can decide whether you believe it or not.
Have a
Does
very
this person have any
strong
bias or prejudice? Do they have anything to gain
accent.
by what they're saying? Do they have anything to lose? All those things are up to you. But sworn testimony is evidence. Photographs are evidence. Videos are evidence. Statements made by people involved in the case, including Mr. Halderson, are evidence. Our job is to, over the course of the next couple of weeks, present evidence to show you the path of what we believe happened, which is that Chandler Halderson killed his parents,
Oh,
dismembered their
Chandler.
bodies, and hid them around southern Wisconsin. I've been talking about Bart and Krista Halderson. You've heard their names mentioned numerous times by the judges here. That's Bart and Krista Halderson. I'm going to try to use some photos as I talk to maybe guide us along. Some people are more visual learners, some aren't. That's Bart and Krista Halderson, a couple in their early 50s, living in Windsor, Wisconsin. A quiet street, a quiet house, kind of in a quiet town. If you don't know Windsor, think just south of DeForest. Maybe if you're heading up toward the Dells, when you see the Fleet Farm on your left, if you look right, that's Windsor. That's the Halderson home. At this point, perhaps it would be best if I told you a little bit about the Halderson family. Bart, the father, Krista, the mother. They have two sons, Chandler, the defendant, and his older brother, Mitchell. Chandler and Mitchell are close in age, but Mitchell's a little bit older. The time this all happened, living in the Halderson home,
Chandler's
Bart
baby.
Halderson, Krista Halderson, and Chandler. Mitchell had moved out.
Second kid.
Mitchell had a job working as an IT person for a local corporation, doing pretty well in life. He's engaged, doing pretty well in life. Buying a house, adult things, growing up. But in July of 2021, it's Bart and Krista living in that house, and their adult 23-year-old son, Chandler Halderson, living in his room. Now, all of the events I'm going to describe, for the most part,
How old was he
take
living at
place
home?
during the first week of July, from the 1st to about the 8th. So I put up a calendar. This is not evidence in the case, I suppose. It might be. Maybe I'll mark it as an exhibit. But it's to provide some reference. And I put a little flag on there. Because if you remember this year, the 4th of July was on a Sunday. Everyone celebrated, of course, all weekend. A lot of places celebrated on Saturday. But the 4th of July was on a Sunday. Now I'm giving my opening statement. The judge told you opening statements aren't evidence. And in fact, that's the reason you don't have notebooks. I'd like to think so, so you have to pay attention to me, but that's not true. It's because nothing I say is evidence. So as I say things up here, what I'm saying is what I expect to prove in the next couple of weeks. But what I expect to prove
Couple of
beyond any
weeks.
reasonable doubt is that on July 1st, 2021, somewhere between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., Chandler Halderson murdered his parents. It's an important date, and it's an important time to remember. July 1st, between 3 and 5. But the story doesn't start there. And this trial wouldn't be 3 to 4 weeks if the trial ended there. The story starts a week later, on July 7th, 2021, nearly a week after killing his parents, but no one in the world knowing. Chandler Halderson walks into the Northeast Precinct of the Dane County Sheriff's Office and says, "I'd like to file a missing persons report." He sits down with sheriff's deputies, and you'll meet them today, and he gives a long story. My parents, they just haven't come back from the cabin. They were there this weekend. We have a cabin up north. It's in White Lake, up in Langlade County. It's pretty far up north, a couple of hours. They just haven't come back yet. They were going to come back Monday or Tuesday, and I don't know where they are. Who were they with? The deputies ask. I don't know. I helped them pack Thursday night. They must have left Friday early before I woke up at 6. Who'd they go with? I don't know. Where are their cars? Well, they're still at the house. What'd you help them pack? Bottles of liquor, lots of money, tools, silver bars. Why were they going up there? Some people they were fixing a window. Some people there was a plumbing issue, storm damage. The story varied. Sometimes they took just money. Sometimes they took just liquor. But over that day, and the next, I'm talking to numerous sheriff's deputies, detectives, including those detectives, he gives this bizarre story of his parents leaving in an unknown car, going to a cabin with an unknown couple, with an unknown amount of money, for really an unknown reason. So sheriff's deputies do what cops do, which is they ask him, "Have you heard from him?" And he says, "Yeah. I got a text from my mom." And he did. He showed him his phone.
And he did.
Made it safely. This is from Crystal Halderson to Chaz. That's what his family calls him. Not Chandler, they call him Chaz. Made it safely. Can't get anything through, though. Yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. Be home Monday night, Tuesday early. I love you lots. So at this point, the sheriff's deputies don't know what they're dealing with. These folks get up there and decide, now we're going to go to the casino for a few days. We're going to play hooky. Didn't make a lot of sense. They started talking to coworkers and realized these people had never no-called, no-showed, missed work, which they both did on Friday. Did they crash their car? Did this other couple kidnap them? Where the hell are they? But what good police do, and what they did in this case, is they start looking into the people who saw them last, who were with them last, who reported them missing. And in this case, all three of those things, the person who purportedly saw them last, was with them last, and reported them missing were the same person. There's Chandler Halderson. So what the police did, started to look into Chandler Halderson. This is all occurring in the same 24-hour, 48-hour period. And what they learn about him isn't suspicious at all. He's a Madison College student, MATC. They go by Madison College now. Madison College is about to graduate. He's studying renewable resource engineering, kind of a hybrid IT degree, with solar panels, things of that sort. He's about to get a certificate. But things had looked bright for him. He'd recently been working at American Family Insurance. He's working from home like most of us the last couple of years. But he's working a good job at American Family Insurance. And not only was he working a good job, Chandler had just gotten a better job. He got hired at SpaceX.
What?
He was about to embark on a career that people in the IT field could only dream of. He's planning to move to Titusville, Florida. That's where SpaceX operation is, down in Florida. With his girlfriend. They'd rented an apartment. They'd bought a car.
Well, that's cool.
And not only was this not someone who was antisocial, he was pro-social. He was working with the Madison Police and the Department of Natural Resources on their rescue diving team. He was a scuba diver.
Well, damn.
Working with the police. The only thing that was a bit odd is he'd recently suffered a head injury. Fallen down the stairs, had terrible concussion, was unable to move for the most part. Had to wear a neck brace. He was permanently, perhaps injured. All of those things threw police off from thinking it was Chandler. He had anything to do with this. And at that point, for all they knew, as sad as it is, Bart and Krista and an unknown couple were crashed into a ditch somewhere between here and White Lake, Wisconsin, dead from a car crash. So they started looking. Deputies are sent up north. The Langlade County Sheriff's Department is searching a cabin. No one had ever been there. It didn't look like anyone had been there at all in years. It was run down. The grass hadn't been mowed. There was no food in the refrigerator. No one had been there. So the police expand their search and they start talking to not only just Chandler, people about Chandler, they start talking to people who were with Chandler that weekend. Specifically, they talked to his girlfriend, a young girl named Catherine. She goes by Cat. And Cat says, I was with him like all weekend. We had a normal 4th of July weekend. We went out to my family's farm. We got a farm. There was a pool. We ate dinner. Chandler was having the concussion issue and he couldn't really move his legs. And so he asked to use their pool the next day because he thought that was good therapy. So the police, what do they do next? They go talk to the person who owns the farm. And they say, was Chandler out here? And she goes, yeah, he was out here on the 4th of July. But you know what? He showed up the next day by himself. He showed up the next day by himself. I told him he could come back anytime, as we just say to people, not expecting they're going to roll into your house the next day. She says he was acting bizarre. Said that he had a doctor's appointment and they'd given them some bad news that he was going to lose his job at SpaceX because he couldn't travel. He couldn't attend orientation to start. And she goes, he asked to use the pool. And of course I said yes. This woman will testify and she'll tell you that she sat in her house for a while, perhaps a bit weirded out that someone had just shown up at her rural farm, but she let him have his space. But about an hour later, she goes down to the pool to check on him. He's not there.
It's so itchy.
No one had opened the pool. No one had been in the pool. But she sees his car. It's parked out in the field. Away from the pool.
Field.
Backed in toward where that grass is a bit longer. And had its hatch up. She thought, boy, that was strange.
It was strange.
She thought maybe he's just on a walk. So she goes in the pool. She said, I'm still in the pool. If you remember that weekend, it was extraordinarily hot.
Lord.
She starts swimming. She says, then I see Chandler. He's walking out the woods in that area. Now, at this point in the investigation, the police are out there with this woman. They're out on the farm. And she says he walked out over there. And you'll hear from the Detective Brett Baverstock, who was out there. And he'll tell you that his eyes kind of shifted up. And he saw vultures. I promise the photos are only going to go this far for right now. But the police walked about 20 yards into the woods. And in that pile of debris, under dozens of sticks, bushes, and dirt, they found Bart Halderson. Now, when I say they found Bart Halderson, I need to explain that. They found a human torso.
Jesus.
Someone had crudely chopped off the head, the arms, and sawed off the legs in the middle of the thigh, leaving the underarm and the beginnings of the pants. They removed the sticks and brush over a course of a few hours. They brought out doctors from the medical examiner's office to make sure everything was done appropriately. They rolled the torso over. There were gunshots in the back. This man had been shot in the back and chopped up. At this point, the farm, beautiful farm, all cultivated for years with wildflowers, kind of an Eden of sorts, was turned into a crime scene. Police scene. Drones were in the air. Cadavers, dogs were on the ground. Everyone's looking through absolutely everything they could, but it's a farm. There's a million places things could be. But one detective said, look at that in the woods. A garbage can full of a tarp. It was. I'll tell you that tarp.
What a place.
The Wisconsin State Crime Lab eventually. Bart, Halderson, Krista Halderson, their blood is all over it. Another detective said, that spot where Chandler was walking out of the woods, there's an oil barrel there, like an old fuel tank with a hole in it. That's right where the car was parked. So she peeks her head in. And that's what she sees. Broken saw blades, hand saws, scissors, tree loppers, all of them tested by the state crime lab, all of them covered human flesh and blood. Bart,
Jesus.
Krista Halderson. The farm was searched extensively, and I'll tell you that some months later, things were even continuing to be found. Up to this fall, in October, the homeowner, the person who owns the farm, was tearing apart a barn trying to clean it. And there in a barn about 100 yards from where Bart Halderson was found, the murder weapon, behind a bunch of boards on the side of the barn.
Why did nobody check the barn?
At this point in the investigation, the police knew they needed to start talking to Chandler. He's seen coming out of the location where his dad's body was, brutally chopped apart. The tools, the cutting instruments are found there. So they do what police do. They bring him downtown. But they ask him, and he's at the house, and they ask him and his girlfriend to come downtown with them. And they do. And that girlfriend, Kat, is in one room. Chandler is in another. Chandler, and you'll see this, we'll play it, for over an hour meets with police. And again, regurgitates this odd story of his parents with this missing couple in a random car, going places that no one really knew. Where Kat, in the other room, she's vomiting information to the police. Literally,
Of course she
vomiting
is.
at times. But also vomiting information in terms of she has her phone out. She's giving them pictures. She's providing every single detail she can because she'll tell you when she testifies. She's one of these people that watches these crime shows. And she knows when someone's missing, you got to exclude the people closest to him first. And she thought, that's what we got to do. Chandler didn't have anything to do with this. I didn't have anything to do with this. We got to get to the people who did. And the first step is we got to exclude us. She didn't for a second think that Mr. Halderson had done anything wrong. She thought she was with him most of the day. And I'll tell you right now, Kat did nothing wrong. Kat was an unknowing, unwilling accomplice to some of this because she did absolutely nothing. And she'll tell you, she liked Mr. and Mrs. Halderson. There were the normal disputes you'd have with your boyfriend or girlfriend's parents. Maybe you want to go out a lot and they don't let you. Maybe you want to hang out more than they don't want to. She liked it. Her phone is full of messages between her and Mrs. Halderson. Friendly in all respects. Kat meets with police not just once, but multiple times. And in one of these meetings, she says, you know what was weird? Is this weekend, when I was with Chandler, while his parents were at the cabin, I left the house early one day, on Saturday, in fact, Saturday, July 3rd. And she says, he told me he was going to do chores that morning around the house. But when I looked at my Snapchat, I saw his location was in a weird spot. If you don't know, on Snapchat, you can set it up so that
For all you
people can see
boomers out
exactly where
there
you
that
are.
don't know.
A GPS tracker on you at all times, if you will. Chandler had that set up with his girlfriend. And she goes, it was so weird where he was. I took a screenshot of it on my phone. And that's what it showed. Chandler was saved as hubby in her phone. That's perhaps a term of endearment between two folks dating in their 20s. But she said, at 8:58 in the morning, when he was supposed to be doing chores on Saturday, July 3rd, I thought it was strange that he was in what appears to be
She took a picture on her
a
phone.
forest on the banks of the Wisconsin River.
She was gonna ask him later,
near Prairie du
what the
Sec.
hell were you doing? Where were you at?
Police took
You
that.
weren't at home.
They
But
identified
you said you
immediately where that
were.
location was, just based on looking at it. That's a bridge.
Gonna
Couldn't be
be.
hard. Out they go.
She was gonna
The
catch
drones
his
go up,
ass.
the dogs go out, the search team starts searching.
That's what she was gonna do.
Very quickly, and I promise this is as far as the photos will go,
For now.
they find the remains of Krista Halderson. Now, when I say Krista Halderson, I have to qualify that as well.
Okay.
We found her legs. One complete leg, then somewhat farther away in another bush, a foot, a thigh, but the same pattern. Crudely cut apart, what appears to be hand saws, axes, things of that. No more of Krista Halderson that's identifiable to her will ever be found. She's just those two legs. At this point, police thought, this is just a strange location. Why would Chandler be out there? He'd been out there before. And they started talking to people, including girlfriends of his in the past, friends of his. And they say, yeah, Chandler really liked this location out on the Wisconsin River. He'd go there all the time. It's where he'd go swimming. When his friends came into town, that was the secret swimming spot. And one friend even said, you know what? Last year, he sent me a picture while he was out there. Kind of shirtless, hanging from a tree with a machete. I don't know. Didn't have a lot of significance at the time when the police saw it, but eventually someone realized
With a machete.
the tree looks unique. Interesting V pattern right there. The hollowness of the tree as it goes down. The way in which 5 of those branches branch off. And eventually one of the detectives realizes why. Something clicked. It was the exact location he ditched his mother's remains.
Not very good at
That's about
ditching
100 feet away.
bodies.
So obviously, it shouldn't come to anyone's surprise, at some point Chandler was arrested.
Maybe I should have.
In fact, he was arrested
places
on
he
July 8th.
wasn't that familiar with.
When you're arrested for a lot of crimes, you go to jail, you get booked in, and not much more happens investigation-wise after that.
Or that you
They have
have
looked at it. But
frequented
of
in
course,
the
that's not the
past.
case in a murder investigation, especially something like
Not
this.
usually a good.
So Chandler is taken to jail, and the police start searching. When I say searching, you're going to hear about searches of the house, searches of this farm, searches of this property. You're going to hear about searches of landfills, ponds, and ditches all across Dane County. But one of the things they started searching was, what was this guy doing on his phone that weekend? And oddly enough, most of what they found was nothing. Either Chandler hadn't Googled anything all weekend,
Which is
except for the
possible.
8th, or he had deleted his search history. You'll never know.
Google something every day.
But remember, he was arrested on July 8th, taken to the police station, and that's where they told him, hey man, we know what's going on. So meaning, while he was still on his phone on July 8th, he was still telling everyone his parents were missing. Not just the police. This kid was standing in his front lawn giving media interviews to all the local media outlets about the cabin and the unknown couple and the unknown car. He was going door to door in his neighborhood. My parents are missing. Can you help me out? Do you have any security cameras, by the way? And you'll hear from these neighbors. Some of them were so weirded out by what was going on that they secretly recorded those conversations.
Oh,
One of them, you'll hear, was a man who'd only been retired as a detective with the City of Madison Police for about a month. He recorded his conversation with Mr. Halderson. But while he's doing this that
what is
morning,
that?
what's he Googling? This is what he's Googling. Body found, Wisconsin. Woman's body found, Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. We'll come back to the next two. Dead body found in Wisconsin. Body found in Milwaukee River. He's searching for whether they found his parents. And you'll hear in this case, he's starting to search because he's starting to get worried because the amount of police in his neighborhood has been ramping up and up and up because unbeknownst to him, they're finding his parents' remains. And you'll hear that while this is going on, while he's Googling these things, he's frantically calling police officers. Hey, why are there more cops in my neighborhood? Calls this guy, Brian Shunk. He records him. What's going on? There's more cops. Did something happen? Did you find something?
He wants to insert himself
The middle ones.
in
State versus Peter.
investigation.
Probably means nothing to everyone.
He knows
It meant nothing to
what's
me
going on.
when I first saw it. The name rung a bell, and I wondered why.
What was it? I missed it. I was talking.
Not only did it show he Googled State versus Peter Capuzza, it showed that he clicked on a link on the Wisconsin court's website and read something. What he read was a legal case, much like this one is the State versus Chandler Halderson. The State versus Peter Capuzza, though, was a case that made it to the Court of Appeals based on some legal technicalities about a man who dismembered part of his family members
Oh, shit.
and threw their bodies in the river.
Huh.
So at the same time, Chandler Halderson is
Well,
going
why would
door to
you
door in his
do that?
neighborhood, crying about his parents being missing, talking to the local news, telling sheriff's deputies, signing documents saying they're missing. He's conducting legal research to get himself out of today, so that today never happens.
Perhaps.
Now, when I started with that calendar a while ago, and I said the police were initially thrown off because of one thing, and that was text from Krista. And it's real. I'll tell you, text message.
It's
It's
real.
on the search warrant returns from US Cellular. It's on the phone that we were able to search. We're not able to search every phone, but some of them are. Made it safely. Can't get anything through, though. Yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake.
You have
Parade.
cellular, I get it.
Be home Monday night, Tuesday. Love you lots. Sent on the 4th of July. So the police started looking into that. And the first thing they found was White Lake.
Baby, you're a
The parade was on July 3rd. Remember, the 4th of July this year was on a Sunday. So everyone celebrated on Saturday. So they started thinking, well, how the hell did this message get sent? So they searched the Halderson home, where Chandler was.
Oh, no.
And in the garage, under a shelf, in a shoe, wrapped in aluminum foil, was his mother's phone.
Well, damn.
With her driver's license.
With her driver's license.
Police would later subpoena the records from US Cellular, the cell phone carrier.
Just in
published Chandler and
case.
the family. And they would look into what cell towers were being used when that message was sent. If you didn't know, all of you probably have cell phones. At any time, your phone is pinging off of different cell towers. It's not always the same. As you sit here, half of you might be using one tower and half of you might be using another. It's based on the workload of those towers. You'll hear about that. But it's generally an approximate area of where you are.
Proximate.
That message on July 4th, Krista there's in pink, Chandler's in green. The message was sent from the Halderson home on July 4th. Chandler sent it to himself. So at this point, the investigators began to wonder, and perhaps you're beginning to wonder how the evidence will come out. How does this happen? How does this kid, with everything in the world going for him, promising new jobs, school, a girlfriend that loves him, willing to move across the country for him, even physically, a kid who just suffered this major concussion, was unable to use his legs for the most part. How does this happen? And what you'll learn, it happens because none of these things are true. He wasn't going to Madison College. He wasn't studying renewable resource engineering. The people at American Family Insurance, they'd never even heard of him. There's no indication he'd ever even applied for a job, much less had any job at SpaceX. The apartment he told his girlfriend he'd rented and the car he'd bought, none of that was real.
Well, damn.
The Madison police, they don't even have a scuba diving team. Neither does the DNR.
Bullshit.
From this concussion he apparently suffered, he did go to the hospital. You'll hear from the doctor who was there. He said, yeah, he came in, he reported that he hit his head falling down the stairs. I diagnosed him with a mild concussion, gave him a neck brace on the way out, told him he could use it if he needed it. But none of the things that Chandler reported to other people, the leg weakness, his inability to move, drive, travel, none of that was real. And given what you're going to find out in this case, you may conclude at the end of it, he never suffered any fall at all.
That was a lie too.
Is that it was all made up. Now, police started looking into all of these lies.
Sounds
As a
completely
person
lying.
who looks so promising, was able
Lightning.
to convince so many people of his success, how are you able to keep this up? How are you able to catfish your family, your girlfriend, your brother, your friends? And they started to find things around the Halderson home in the email accounts of Bart Krista Halderson, in the email accounts of Chandler Halderson. When he talked about American Family Insurance, the first big lie Chandler was making up, again, the people at American Family Insurance, you'll hear them testify, they're directors of human resources. He never worked there, never worked for any of their affiliates, never worked for any of the companies that are associated with them. Chandler
We don't know
only
him.
worked there for a year, but he never had any money. And his father was an accountant, so his father would ask him questions pretty much daily. Why don't you have any money? Why haven't you paid any rent? And Chandler spun an amazing web of lies. First, it was, well, I'm a salary guy, but they were accidentally paying me hourly, so they just held my paychecks until they fixed it. Then it was, well, I gave him the wrong direct deposit info. Then it kind of shifted eventually. He said, well, they were going to pay me, but now the amount is so much, they got to pay me so much money that when they deposited in the bank, they thought it was fake. And police started to find emails like this. This from Tom Selznick, a guy at American Family Insurance, the Northeast remote human resources guy, describing this. You're registered as salary, but you're making hourly. And these emails would go back and forth with Chandler and the HR person, and eventually he'd forward them to his father. But in the way a parent looks at their child as maybe telling the truth is not the way that you as jurors have to look at this. You, like the police, maybe have to take a more critical look at emails like this. And for one, notice, why is the guy who works at Human Resources at American Family Insurance using a Proton Mail generic email address? Why is the guy who's the Human Resources manager spelling the word resources wrong?
You
So he's the
know,
Human Recourses manager. It's comically fake. He emailed himself back and forth, trying to explain why he didn't have any money,
maybe the
and he forwards it to his dad.
human resources man is a bad speller.
But here's where the
Spell
story
check
gets maybe a little more complex.
wasn't working right.
Having a fake job, so a lot of riddles in your life. No one's hassling you to get a new job. No one's hassling you to do chores all day. The problem is, if your dad works from home, if he was an accountant, for instance, which he was, and which he did, you actually have to wake up early every day and go to work. So there he was. Messages between Bart and Chandler. Hey, are you up for your meetings? Yeah. Over and over again. So Chandler woke up. But he had nothing to do all day because his job was pretend. And so he sat on his computer playing video games. And I'm not against people playing video games. I'm a guy myself. People play video games. But video games, if you don't know, and some of you are of an age where you do, and some of you are an age where you don't, are a much more social thing than they used to be. When you play video games, you don't just sit on Nintendo 64 and play Mario by yourself. You're playing role-player games with people from around the world. And who's up early in the morning when Mr. Halderson had to wake up to attend his fake work meetings?
People in other countries.
People in the military who are stationed overseas.
Oh,
They speak English, they're American,
well,
but they're on a different time schedule. They're on his time schedule. Most people here probably play video games at night during weekdays. But every day, Mr. Halderson was able to wake up and find a group of friends to play video games with online, one of which was stationed in Germany.
sure.
This friend was a guy named Andrew Smith. Now, Mr. Smith, Mr. Halderson, became kind of best friends. They would talk all the time. They communicated in this video game all the time. And Mr. Smith, he'll testify. He's coming up here. Lives down south. He's back in the U.S. He'll tell you that Chandler really liked an SKS rifle when they play some of these shooting games. It's just something he liked. Not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with that. But this past
Are you
summer,
a gun guy?
about a month before the murders of
Everybody in
Mr. Halderson,
Wisconsin has a gun.
this online friend, Andrew Smith, comes to visit Mr. Halderson. And in fact, stays at the home with Bart and Krista. This is a picture of Mr. Smith in that perhaps crudely designed yellow shirt. That's Mr. Halderson. It's the only photo we have of him. Visit.
Array of
You'll learn that Mr.
Well, my
Smith
son has
has
that
gotten out of the military.
shirt, but
He's
it's
done with
an
it.
array of freaking
But you also learn that he really likes guns.
16.
Like he really likes guns. And he knew his friend liked SKS rifles. So when he visited him this year in June,
Crudely.
he brought with him a gift. The SKS rifle
I never-
that was found about 100 yards from Bart Halderson's body. Now, you'll meet Mr. Smith and you'll probably concur with me after meeting him. He's not really probably a paperwork kind of guy. And so when he gave the gun to Mr. Halderson, he wanted to document that he transferred the gun. But he wasn't going to fill out any paperwork. So he just took the serial number of the gun. He put Mr. Halderson's driver's license next to it, snapped a picture on his phone. There's a clear picture of that. But that serial number matches the gun found in the barn 100 yards from Bart Halderson's body. And before Mr. Smith left, he decided he would give his friend something else, which was about 400 rounds of high-powered ammunition.
What do you do with that much ammunition?
Now, you'll hear from Mr. Smith. Despite maybe his bizarre actions and maybe his bizarre statements he may make, he's not a suspect. Police proved he was in Texas at the time all of this happened.
Weird friend
Another
skills.
unknowing accomplice to Mr. Halderson's crime.
Friend making skills.
So at this point, Mr. Halderson's working a pretend job at American Family Insurance. He's not getting paid. His father
Sorry,
is an
hear
accountant.
the
He's kind of on
buzzing
his
in the
case about it.
background.
He's got to
Doing
figure out
nails.
something else.
The
And the best way out of your pretend job
thingy.
is an even more pretend job. So around May, going into June of this past year,
He's gonna go work for Elon
American
Musk.
Family wasn't going well. So Mr. Halderson decided to get a new job.
Be an astronaut.
He's going to be an astronaut.
Oh shit.
I work at SpaceX. This is messages to his girlfriend. I have a good feeling about SpaceX. I have a follow-up interview for Florida tomorrow. Shoot, sorry, I got the job. I have training next week over the computer and leave June 11th and start June 14th. He didn't give himself a lot of time, but what he gave himself was an escape hatch. He could move. He could end the lies that he had going on in his life about being a rescue scuba diver and working for American Family Insurance by simply moving to Florida.
Every time
That presented with it
Family
one major problem,
insurance.
which was that job, which was also make-believe, would pay absolutely no better than the last job that was make-believe.
Still gonna pay you nothing.
So in late June, as he's supposed to start the job at SpaceX in Florida for Elon Musk, something happens in the Halderson family, something real. There's a change. Remember when I started off and I said there were two sons? His older brother
Mitchell.
gets hospitalized. That's real. It happened.
Well, damn.
Got diagnosed with diabetes and was having some complications. He's doing great now. Mr. Halderson uses that as an excuse to delay starting at SpaceX. It was a stroke of good luck for him, a stroke of bad luck, of course, for the family, but a stroke of good luck for him. But that only gave him a couple of weeks. So his brother, who's doing really well in life, engaged, house, real job, making a lot of money, suddenly he's in the hospital, being doted over by his family, by his mother. People care about him. So roughly a week later, when Chandler Halderson needs to think of a new lie to get out of the SpaceX lie, guess who ends up in the hospital? Being doted over by his mother
Oh,
and his
Chaz.
family with a supposed neck injury. This is Father's Day of this year, in late June. That's Bart Halderson in the middle, and Mitchell on the right. And of course, Chandler wearing a neck brace that no one told him he had to wear on the left. Now, around this time, Chandler started telling people an extraordinarily bizarre set of claims. That he had a brain bleed, a hematoma, that he had spinal damage, that he needed his head drilled open, that he had inability to use his legs at all. Couldn't drive. People had to do that for him. That he had nerve damage, that he needed to get a colostomy bag. But most importantly, he couldn't go to Florida.
Oh,
The doctor
really?
told him he couldn't fly. Of course, that's not
Well,
true.
you can
You'll see
drive.
his medical records and you'll see his doctor testify. So suddenly this man, who was, for all intents and purposes, disabled, is being doted over by his family. People were making him meals. You'll see notes his mom was leaving for him. Call this neighbor if you need anything. She'll help you out. Couldn't drive, couldn't work, couldn't do chores. Now, a bit of a preview and a fast forward. This guy who's wearing a neck brace nearly every day in late June 2021 would have no problem just days later carrying large bags of ice out of gas stations to chill his father's cut-up body in a freezer. And you'll note, no neck brace. And in fact, you'll note in this case, Chandler Halderson is never seen in that neck brace again after July 1st, 2020. Kills his parents. So the job lies are over for Chandler in his life. American Family Insurance, don't worry about that because he got this new job at SpaceX.
Stop saying American
SpaceX,
Family
I can't get because
Insurance.
I'm hurt. It was a perfect scenario. But there was one last lie that Chandler had to get out. And that is he had told everyone he was going to MATC for college and that he was about to graduate. And you'll hear there's a hint of truth to that he was going there at one point. In fact, there's a hint of truth to all of these lies. He did go to MATC for like a semester. He failed out. But he wasn't going there anymore. And the parents were starting to grow suspicious. And we knew this because when we searched the house, we started to find notes on Bart Halderson's desk. Bart Halderson was one of these guys who prints his emails. I don't know if any of you print your emails, but some people, they get an email and they print it out.
Sometimes.
That was Bart. We find one. It's an email between Bart and Krista, detailing a conversation that he had had with Chandler's advisors at MATC. He's supposed to meet with someone else, so we met with this guy, Daniel Spieth. Chandler's going to get a solar certificate. He wasn't. He's registered for fall classes. He wasn't. He's in the IT program. He wasn't. All of these things, line by line, none of them true. But Bart Halderson talked to this person. So police honed in on something. That line. When I talked to the advisor, he sounds just like Chaz on the phone. And he gives this number. That is, of course, because Bart Halderson, when he talked to Chandler's college advisor, was just talking to Chandler, who had bought a burner phone, cheap phones from like Walgreens that you can buy with no service carrier. And police know that because they searched Chandler's bedroom, and in his desk drawer, they found that phone.
With that number. That's crazy.
Now, this kept going. The lie about going to MATC or Madison College was the most extensive. There were emails, dozens, if not hundreds of emails going back and forth between supposed advisors at MATC and Chandler, and then he'd forward them to his dad, and people like someone named Alyssa Brandt, 64. Sometimes Chandler would spell Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T, sometimes just with a T and no D, depended on the day. But they all had the @Gmail address, not at madisoncollege.edu. And you'll hear from the people at Madison College, their people have real emails. They don't use Gmail. But it was over and over again. Alyssa Brandt was one of them. You heard about Daniel Spieth, also at Gmail. There was someone named Aaron Hoover, also at Gmail. In this one, Chandler's getting upset. I have to have a call with whomever's in charge within the next 30 minutes. I have been a student for over 3 years, and I will be treated fairly. Of course, he's yelling at himself. all of these were fake.
See,
Bad
going at
news to
himself.
himself and eventually to his dad. The Halderson parents had to have been growing extraordinarily frustrated. Kid wasn't getting paid. He was injured suddenly. His college transcripts aren't coming through, so he can't get a job. So police looked at that original note again.
Non-existent college transcripts.
They saw something interesting, which is in this sea of fake people, Daniel Spieth, Aaron Hoover, Tom Selznick,
Tom Selleck.
Alyssa Brandt, there was one name that stood out, Omar Joe. And that name didn't stand out because it was fake. It stood out to the police because it was real.
Real.
That is the only real person on any of these emails. And what we discovered in this investigation is in just the day and a half prior to being murdered, Bart Halderson, Chandler's dad, called MATC and pretended to be Chandler to try to finally get some information on what's going on. Just as any of you could call any doctor and pretend to be your kid, you know their name, their social security number, their birthday, you can get through. You can get through those minor security things. Bart called MATC, said, I'm Chandler, and I want some answers. And for 17 minutes, Bart Halderson, just before his murder, talked to a man named Omar Jobe. Omar Jobe is a entry-level customer service guy at MATC. He's got no skin in the game, doesn't even really remember the call, but it was recorded for customer service purposes. And Bart Halderson questions Omar. And he's very mean at first, because in his mind, he'd been getting screwed around for a year on where his son's transcripts were and what degree program he's in and why he hasn't graduated yet. But toward the end of the call, Bart asked Omar Joe, hey, do any of these people work there? Alyssa Brandt, Daniel Spieth, Aaron Hoover.
Nope.
And he's told no, they've never worked there.
No one.
They haven't. And he says, that'll be it then. That'll be it then, are the last recorded words of Bart Halderson alive. Bart Halderson, shortly after that, sends a text message. Text message that ultimately sealed his fate, which was a text to his own son. And it says, I spoke with Omar Jobe. Now, what happens over the next 24 or so hours is a bit unknown. Homicide investigations are a lot of unknowns because the two people who are the victims, who maybe know the most about what happened, are of course dead. But there's not much verifiable information that happens over the next 24 hours. It's also unknown if Chandler even knew who Omar Jobe was. Of course, he wasn't going to MATC, so why would he know who some lowly entry-level customer service guy was? He wouldn't. But Bart Halderson did. And when you look at Bart Halderson's work calendar that he maintains at his accounting firm, you see something quite interesting. Remember at the beginning, I said I wanted you to remember a date and time, which is that the Haldersons were killed between 3 and 5 p.m. on July 1st, 2021. Guess what was on Bart's calendar at that exact time? He was supposed to have a meeting with the people at MATC with his son. So he's supposed to go to MATC and have this meeting at 3 o'clock on July 1st, 2021. Of course, that meeting couldn't happen because he wasn't going there, and none of the people were real. But Bart Halderson knew that. Bart Halderson knew that. And so Chandler had obviously figured that out. You can't get outside. And so the next day, Chandler Halderson wakes up on July 1st and starts messaging his girlfriend. 7:26, I hardly slept. 7:27, stuff has been going well for me lately. Just trying to plan for the next thing to fuck me over. 7:51, I had a great future planned. It's falling apart. 1:04, just 2 hours prior to the murders. I overheard they might go to the cabin with their friends, but I don't know. So somewhat of a full circle at this point. That's the moment. Chandler Halderson decides to kill his parents and engage in this bizarre story of them missing at a cabin with an unknown couple in an unknown car at 1:04, July 1st. Now, shortly after this message, just about an hour and 10 minutes, Bart Halderson's getting ready to go to MATC for this meeting. Perhaps to confront Chandler, perhaps Chandler's going to confront him. Bart texts Chandler, "I'm ready whenever you are." About 50 minutes prior to when he was killed. Those are the last words ever recorded by Bart Halderson.
Found him out.
His phone is never used, really. Again, dies at some point. He never goes back to work. No one ever sees him. The neighborhood he lives in, riddled with security cameras, never see him again. I'm ready when you are. What the evidence will show in this case is that sometime after the "I'm ready whenever you are" message, probably just around 3 o'clock when he was supposed to go to this meeting with MATC, Bart Halderson was shot in the back multiple times with a high-powered rifle. And after shooting his dad, Chandler texts his mom, "Dad's phone died. Text or call me. And get sewed on your way home. I have an extra hour of work." You know he didn't have an extra hour of work, but he was delaying for getting there because the evidence will show he needed to move things around, prepare for what he was about to do when she showed him. She responded, "Okay, I can," smiley face. Those were the last words he kissed her. Shortly thereafter, around just after 5, neighborhood security cameras, the Haldersons didn't have one, but the neighborhood, a lot of people did, show Krista pulling in, getting out of the car, walking in. She's never seen again until her legs are found out by the Wisconsin River. But just after killing his mom and his dad, the evidence in this case will show that Chandler went on his phone. If you go on your phone, I don't know if any of you have ever taken a note. You can take notes on your phone. iPhone has an app called Notes. We got some raw data. And I'll put it up here in a second. I won't put the raw data because it's a bit challenging to see. But Chandler creates a note about 5:11 that day on July 1st, probably minutes after killing his parents. And the note reads, "Weekend chores, H2O2 lemon." H2O2 is the chemical name for oxide. You'll hear from people in this case, it's essentially a household cleaner to clean up blood. Lemon deodorizes things. Mixed together, it's a pretty cheap cleaning product you can have at home. So Chandler writes a note after murdering his parents, "H2O2 lemon. Don't move your shit upstairs, get a job, and clean the floor." He then does just that. Spends the afternoon cleaning the house, eventually jumps in the shower. We know he's in the shower because his girlfriend and him FaceTime when they're in the shower. No judgment, but that's what happened. And the girlfriend took a screenshot. We know he's in the shower. They say they're good nights, and Chandler says, "I'm going to bed." But he doesn't. He goes to gas stations. He's carrying out large bags of ice. Because what Chandler had done that night is what you all probably suspect by now. He had dismembered his parents, or at least started the process, and had to fit them inside freezers that were in the Halderson home. And you'll see some of these freezers. They're clean. There's still some evidence of it. That night,
Time in the show.
I'm not going to show many photographs for a little bit, because I think we deserve to get into some of the things you're going to see. That night, what appears to have happened, what the evidence will show, is Mr. Halderson took items from around the house and began cutting apart his parents.
Oh, Jesus.
Saw blades covered in Bart and Krista's blood.
Okay.
An axe, Bart and Krista's blood. Hand saws, things of that sort, covered in Bart and Krista's blood. He cleaned the house as best he could, and you'll hear about that. But still, blood spatter found, Bart and Krista's blood around the house. And he had a plan. It wasn't a well-thought-out plan, but he had one. And that was he was going to burn the remains in the family fireplace there in the house. So it's July 1st, and if any of you remember 4th of July, we got pretty hot this year. People in the neighborhood thought it was a little bit weird that so much fireplace was going on, they smelled stuff. One person, this neighborhood's full of retired cops, but one retired cop said, "I smelled like a barbecue, it smelled like a pig roast." He said that just not knowing what it was at the time, talking to the police. And that night, a neighbor who had a security camera behind the Halderson home, way far away, was able to catch something. Because it was pitch black at night, he was able to catch just a little glimpse of all the windows in the Halderson house. We have an expert that's going to come in who works with video and light analysis. He's going to tell you, he was able to figure out which window that was. And the window it was that he was looking at in that camera footage that kind of just piqued his attention was the window by the fireplace. And for many hours over the course of that night, the light flickered, came on, died down, down. But in the early morning hours the next day, he'd been up all night doing this. Because you'll learn, you really can't burn human remains. Your home fireplace is not going to get hot enough to do that. It takes an extraordinary amount of heat. If you go to a crematorium, you're reducing it with oxygen, chemicals, not a residential fireplace. But eventually, in the middle of the night, the fire started going well. It appeared that air was being pumped into it, and you'll see when they searched the Halderson home, there was in fact a fan found right next to the fireplace, next to a tape measure, trying to make sure the remains were the right size as they went into the fireplace. But that light at one point grew and grew and grew, and it got very bright in one room. And then all of a sudden, the kitchen light came on, and then all the lights went out. I don't know if anyone's ever taken a hot Pyrex pan out of the stove and put water in it, or dumped water on your windshield on your car window, but it explodes the glass. The evidence in this case will show that what happened was the fire had gotten out of control, burning these human remains. Human fat was rendering out. It was ignited. So Chandler threw water on it. But when you throw water on your residential fireplace, you break the glass. And that's exactly what happened. Just above that broken glass panel, which is clearly shattered, you can see the paint kind of bubbled off from the heat. This is in the search of the home a week later. The fireplace is clearly used. Police noticed something interesting about this photograph, which is, despite being clearly used, the logs are rebuilt. Someone had cleaned out all the ashes and rebuilt it. Clean logs, newspaper, one burnt piece in the middle. But what stuck out to police right away was that little rock right there. They thought, what is that? You'll hear from the people who collected this evidence. You'll hear from an arson specialist from the Department of Justice, a guy named Bill Boswell, who come in. You'll hear from a forensic anthropologist, a doctor named Christina Figueroa Soto, who will tell you, we were all interested in what that was because it was out of place. So they pulled it off and they put it on one of these fancy police deals. And the forensic anthropologist took one look at it. And she said, oh, this is a human skull.
Oh, shit.
He had burned his parents' heads in that fireplace.
Oh, my God.
Later, the police would go through the ash trap of that fireplace and they would find human remains, facial bones, the knee bones, which, because we found Krista's legs by deduction, had to be burnt, all in the ash trap of that fireplace. They were all cataloged. Now, burnt remains can't be tested for DNA. There's no biological material left, but they're able to tell it's human based on the structure of the bone. You'll hear from the anthropologist who will talk about that. So that's what happened on July 1st. Now, you're going to hear about all of those days in between Barton, Krista dying at 3 o'clock on the 1st, all the way through the police report. But to summarize, Chandler stayed up all night, that night of the 1st. Obviously, things weren't going well, burning his parents' remains, so the next day, perhaps not having slept, he walked into Fleet Farm at 7:21 a.m. to buy a tarp. He's on video. He knew his girlfriend was spending the night that night, so he spent the whole day cleaning, but he's sending her text messages, which you will see throughout the day, asking her to bring him hydrogen peroxide and a mop, because he still needed to clean up. The next day, Saturday, July 3rd, 2021, his girlfriend leaves early in the morning. That's the day she snaps that picture of him out by the Wisconsin River dumping off his mom's remains. Spends the rest of the day hanging out. But when he goes home and says he's going to bed that night, this young man who supposedly couldn't drive or carry heavy objects, his phone records show that he's up near the Wisconsin River in Portage. As if you're driving the interstate up to the Dells, right when you cross the Wisconsin River, off in the state land there to the right. For about an hour, in the middle of the night, the police tried to search that area. It was impossible with the currents. Whatever remains were thrown in there are lost forever. July 4th, 2021, this is the day he texts himself. Spends the day with his girlfriend's family, goes to their farm to use the pool. That's the day he says, hey, can I come back tomorrow? Goes to see fireworks. He's living a normal life. No mention of his parents. Takes garbage in the morning, was in that garbage. Search the landfills, but it's impossible to find anything. Garbage. He goes out to the farm to supposedly use the pool where he's seen walking out of the woods. Cell phone tower records prove that he was out there on the farm. Remember I told you he told that person that he was having trouble at work and school and having a bad doctor's appointment. He never went to any doctor's appointment that day. Phone records show he never talked to any doctor. It was all a ruse to be able to go out in the woods and hide his father's body. The next day, not much happens because Chandler was up all night. Again, that light analysis shows all night, the garage light on and off. Found some of these tools, the axe covered in blood. He's cleaning up. At 4:30 in the morning, for no apparent reason, he drives around the city of Madison. No idea what he did there. But he's not doing much. But people begin questioning him about his parents. He just says they're waiting. The person most worried, perhaps, is a friend. She thought that was unlike them. The next day, He drives back to the farm, throws a bag of bloody rags into their garbage can. It's out by the street. And at 11:22, he texts his girlfriend that he's finally going to the police. We know that bag of rags came from his house because they were in the Target bag his girlfriend picked up from Target. And she did the curbside pickup. So her name was printed on the outside. It was when she brought him hydrogen peroxide. He filled the bag with bloody rags and left it at the house. The next day, he starts Googling body found, Wisconsin dismembered body found. He's walking door to door asking about security cameras in his neighborhood. And at 4 p.m., they take him downtown and they arrest him at 6:41.
It's not very good.
So that's the story. That's why you're here for a couple weeks. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of cases end with the murder. This one is just a small piece of the puzzle. None of the things that happen after and none of the things happened before make any sense without knowing the murder happened on a specific day at a specific time. But the evidence in this case, you'll find is overwhelming. Chandler Halderson killed his parents on July 1st. He cut up the bodies with axes, and saws, and knives. And he didn't even give them the dignity of having a funeral or even a final resting place in one piece or together. The remains were scattered across Dane County, in public land, on farms, in garbage cans, in rivers, perhaps every ditch is a possibility in this county. You'll find the evidence in this case is overwhelming. Now, over the next couple of weeks, I'll make you a couple promises as your prosecutor in this case. I'm not here to waste your time. But of all the constitutional rights we talked about in Chandler, he has them. I want you to respect it. There's another one that you should know, which is this is the only time you get to have this trial. You get one trial in the United States of America. And I have to do it right. So if that means calling a lot of witnesses, I apologize in advance. If it means calling experts to say things that maybe you already know, I apologize in advance. But I'm going to do my job right as your prosecutor. Second, you're going to see terrible photographs. There were approximately 5,000 photographs taken in this case. You're going to see maybe total, a couple hundred of actual body parts. Maybe a dozen. We have scoured those photographs and tried to remove ones that are just horrible to see because of the conditions the bodies were in, because of insects and maggots and things of that sort. And instead are trying to only show you photographs that help you understand how the remains were hidden, where they were hidden, how they were dismembered. To the extent possible, we're using cleaner photographs that were taken by the Dane County Medical Center. I promise you, I'm not trying to pull on anyone's heartstrings. I'm not trying to make this overly emotional. You might feel emotional. I suspect many of you have never seen anything like what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks. But I promise to do my best to limit humor. And lastly, I promise to just ask questions, a lot of questions, because you're the jury in this case, and you deserve to hear absolutely everything. It will be a struggle. You'll get sick of walking back and forth these jury rooms. You might get sick of each other. But it's an important task. What happened here shouldn't have happened, but it did. And so in a couple of weeks, when I stand up here and Ms. Raymond stands up here, I'm going to ask you to deliver a verdict, to finally bring some much-needed truth to Chandler Halderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Brown.
I'm going to speed it up. So if you didn't hear it, and you can now, it's fine.
Chandler Halderson did not murder his parents. He is not guilty of those crimes. Chandler Halderson is 23 years old, young man. He likes to play video games, play with his dogs, hang out with his girlfriend, and he lived peacefully in his parents' home. He was just a normal kid. He is a normal kid. So what did happen? What happened to the Haldersons? What happened in that Halderson's home? Remember those questions. They won't be answered at the end of this trial. Remember those questions at the end of this trial when you have to decide whether the state has proven to you that Chandler Halderson killed his parents, because they simply don't know what happened. They just told you what they think happened. We heard a lot of detail of the before and a lot of detail of the after, but one or two simple sentences, and then he killed his parents. The evidence will show you that there is a gap of evidence when it comes to that time frame. And your job is to listen to this evidence as jurors. Listen to the evidence from the perspective of a juror, not from the perspective of a story corroborator, corroborating the state's story. The role of being a juror is a different role than being a person. And that may sound strange, but it is. I think of when I went to law school way back in 1991, and there's a big part of me that feels I went into law school a human being who lived my life feeling things emotionally and relating to things emotionally. And I left law school a really different person. I learned how to be very logical, to apply facts, first to assemble facts, and then to apply these facts to the law as I learned it. Facts, laws, and rules, plus logic. That's your role here as a juror. Don't assume anything. Assumption is the mother of all mistakes. The story that you just heard assumes that Chandler Halderson killed his parents. You cannot assume anything. Your job is to presume that Chandler Halderson is innocent because he today is under the benefit of the presumption of innocence. An assumption is reaching a conclusion without knowing all the information. A presumption is a principle that we all must follow. We must presume him innocent, and we must keep that presumption unless and until the state proves every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not easy. It's not easy in a high-profile case. It's not easy in a case where we all know we're going to see evidence that is disturbing. But you must find a way, like I did in law school, to put your emotions, put your feelings aside, and use the logical part of who you are. Be a juror. Assemble the facts, know the law, and apply the logic without letting your feelings or emotions get in the way. And for each of you, you might have a different way of doing that. But I'm asking you here today to dig deep and find out how that will work for you so that you can presume my client innocent. Now, I'm not going to have a fancy PowerPoint here, and I'm probably not even going to talk very much longer. But as I comment to you on the evidence that you're going to see in this case, I want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, and the judge already indicated this in some of the preliminary instructions, lack of evidence is evidence just as much as any evidence that is presented to you in the courtroom. Look for what's missing. Look for alternate explanations. Because the second thing I want to tell you is that evidence of one thing is not necessarily evidence of another thing. This one fact here could mean a different fact here, but it also could mean 3 or 4 other facts. So you have to avoid jumping to conclusions and really dig deep and look at what this all means. You're going to know that many of the facts, many of the witnesses aren't going to be hotly contested by the defense in this case. And that goes back to what I was just saying. 12, 18, 100 reasonable people can look at a certain situation and form a different conclusion. And when you're talking about a system where you need to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, you better make very sure that you're excluding all of the other things that these facts could mean. Because you just don't know what happened. You're going to know some about the before. You're going to know some about the after. But you're not going to know what happened in the Halderson's home, who did it, what happened, how it went down, whether it was intentional or not, which is an element of homicide. You're just not going to know.
Why? Why am I not going to know?
Know how Bart and Krista would have reacted to these lies. That's never going to be explained to you, why lying turns into murder or how lying turns into murder. Be sure to look for what you're not told, because that's evidence just as much as any evidence is. I'm going to ask you to resist some things in this case as jurors. We already talked a little bit about proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What that means is you must resist guessing. You must resist speculation. You must resist storytelling.
Objection,
Only
speculation.
when it's proven, or if it's proven, which it won't be, beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to ask you to resist losing your objectivity. Objectivity may be hard for people in this case because of the graphic nature of what you've just been told or what you're going to see, but you need to resist losing that objectivity. Commit to being jurors, dispassionate, logical. Don't be swayed by fear. And I ask you to resist any pressure you might feel to convict Mr. Halderson of murder in this case. It's a little unorthodox, but I'm going to tell you, at the end of this case, Attorney Vera and I may stand before you here and say, you know what? They did convict him of this, but what evidence do you have of murder? I like to talk about the Constitution, probably because I'm a defense lawyer. But I think as jurors, as people coming into the system who aren't dealing with this every day, like we are here in the courtroom, you have to remember how important the Constitution is, how important the presumption of innocence is for Mr. Halderson, and how important proof beyond reasonable doubt is. It's the highest standard we have. And it was created and perseveres to this day for this very reason. When someone is on trial for the most serious crime possible, and every little thing they do, every little lie they might have told is blown up and thrown against someone. That's when proof beyond a reasonable doubt matters. You jurors, not the sheriff's department, not Mr. Brown or Ms. Raymond or me or the judge get to decide this case. Individually, you all get a vote. You all get to make your own decision. I simply ask that you remember your role as jurors, that you find a way to stay objective, that you look for the key questions, the key facts that aren't answered, and that you hold the government to this high burden of proof. If you do those things, if you can resist these things, you will reach the right conclusion. Chandler Halderson did not murder his parents.
Well, what did he do then? He just like, oh shit.
Thank you, Attorney General. At this point in time, we have to do a slight bit of housekeeping. Randy will.
Okay, so next it's gonna be a deputy from the county sheriff's office. We're just gonna go right on through. And get through. They should be in order that I have them in. So that's what I should have them in.
Randy will distribute the notebooks to you so that you can use those to the extent you wish as you're listening to evidence and testimony. And then we'll get the podium moved and the state will call its first witness.
Yes, thank you. Should be first on the list.
Oh, once you call, you can wait by counsel until they call you, sir. Thank you. Attorney Raymond.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Deputy John Nelson to the stand.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
Thank you, sir. I would inquire of you if you believe you can do so safely and responsibly. Would you testify without a mask at this time?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Go right ahead. Attorney Raymond.
Oh,
Thank you. Deputy, could you please state your name for the record, spelling both your first and last?
Yep. John Nelson, John, John, Nelson, Nelson.
And how are you employed?
I'm employed with the Dane County Sheriff's Office.
As a deputy?
Correct.
And were you employed as such in July of 2021?
Yes, I was.
And just because you're the first witness in this case, can you just very briefly, in a sentence or two, let the jury know what sort of training did you have to go through in order to become a deputy?
Well, I went through the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Academy, went through our department's in-house training, and have been employed there since 1995.
And were you working on July 7th of 2021 in your capacity as a deputy?
Yes, I was.
And where were you working that day? Where were you stationed out of?
I'm stationed out of our Northeast precinct, which is the Village of Windsor Town Hall. And so I cover the Northeast area of the county.
I'd like to draw your attention to around 11:25 a.m. that morning. What occurred at that time?
I had just returned back to the precinct from a previous call. And as I was walking through the doors to the precinct, I noticed behind me it appeared that somebody had been coming up to the doors. So I met them at the door and at that time had a conversation with an individual.
And do you see that individual in the courtroom today?
I do.
At this point, for purposes of identification, I would ask anyone not inside the jury box or my court reporter to just lower their mask briefly for the count of 3 so that the full face of everyone in view is available. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and replace masks. Thank you. You can answer. Oh, go ahead.
Do you see that individual in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you please identify him by where he is seated and perhaps the color of his shirt?
Looks like a purple shirt seated on the left side of the table, straight ahead over here.
And I'd like to note for the record, the witness did make a hand gesture towards the defendant as well. I'd like to note for the record that the witness has identified Mr. Halderson.
It will.
What did you learn from Mr. Halderson on July 7th, 2021?
When he came to the precinct and spoke to me, he said that he wanted to make a missing persons report.
Okay, and what did he tell you?
He told me that he wanted to report that his parents were missing. I asked who his parents were. He said, pardon, Krista Halderson. And I asked where they lived, and he said they lived on Oak Spring Circles, which was in the Village of Windsor.
Okay, and in fact, that street's a little bit odd. Like one side of the street is Windsor and one side of the street is DeForest, I believe.
Yeah, the portion that they reside in was the Village of Windsor.
Okay. So in reaction to the information the defendant was telling you, what did you do?
When I heard that they lived in the Village of Windsor, we have a Windsor contract deputy that was working, so I immediately called to see whether or not they were available to come up to take the missing persons report.
Okay, were they available?
They were.
Okay, and who is that?
Deputy Josh Seeley.
Okay, what did you do next?
So I remained at the precinct in our day room area with Chandler Halderson until Deputy Seeley arrived. And at that point, Deputy Seeley began interviewing him in the day room. I was present during that portion of the interview.
And how would you describe the defendant's affect, his demeanor?
He seemed quiet, what I would describe as maybe like lethargic. Seemed like maybe he was tired as he was describing the fact that he had not seen his parents since the previous week. It just seemed like he was slow to respond to some of the questions.
Okay, and do you remember any of the specifics of what Mr. Halderson told you during that interview?
He had said that his parents had gone up to their cabin, which I believe was in White Lake, Wisconsin, that they had left the previous week, he thought early Friday morning, and that he had not seen his parents since then, and that at this point he wanted to report them as missing persons.
Did he give you any details about who, if anyone, they were with?
He had said that they had left with another couple, but he did not know who the couple was and had not seen the couple, just that they had left sometime early, what he believed to be early Friday morning.
Did he give you any information about what, if any, vehicle they were in?
He said that they had left in the other person's vehicle because both the vehicles that belonged to his family were still at the residence, but I did not have a description of the other vehicle.
Okay. What did you do after this interview?
So after he was interviewed by Deputy Seeley, we determined that probably the best course of action was for us to go back to the residence to kind of check out the residence. So I told Deputy Seeley that I would accompany him back to the residence for that.
Okay.
How would you describe exhibit number 1?
This would be the residence that we went back to that we were told by Chandler was his home along with his parents.
The Oak Spring address in Windsor, Dane County, Wisconsin?
Correct.
And does exhibit 1 appear to be a true and accurate picture of the home?
Yes.
I would ask to publish it. I would move exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
It is received. It may be published.
The judge sounds like legal
That address.
license.
What did you do once you were there?
So myself and Deputy Seeley had gone into the residence, and at this point, Deputy Seeley was planning on continuing his interviews with him, with Chandler. And I did ask Chandler if we could just walk through the residence real quick. I asked where his parents' bedroom was, and so we went from the main floor. When you walk into the residence, you step into the entry area, and then there's a living room and a kitchen. There's a flight of steps that go down to like a basement, and then a flight of steps that go up to what I would consider to be the second level of the residence. And so he took me upstairs to the second level. We walked through his parents' bedroom so that I could take a look around. And basically, my portion inside the residence of just kind of walking around was the upper level and the main level, which would be the living room, kitchen, and dining room.
In walking around the 2 upper levels, did anything seem off or obvious of a crime at that point?
Of a crime, no.
Okay. How would you describe the furniture in the living room?
The furniture itself was set like you would normally think of, couch and some other seats. But I did notice that they were covered with linen or blankets.
And were they covered while you were there or before you even entered the home?
They were covered before I entered the home.
And Deputy, this might seem like an odd question, but at any point did you request Chandler Halderson to cover the furniture to prevent the spread of dog hair?
No.
And going back just to briefly describe the house, this house would maybe in some circles be described as a tri-level.
Yes.
Okay, so there's 4 levels to the home, but the home's only 2 stories high because they kind of offset each other. Is that a fair description?
Correct.
I like those kinds of houses. They're neat.
After just observing the home, what did you do next in your
You're
portion of the
a fun
investigation?
type of architect.
So we started asking him whether or not there were any other persons that lived at the house. He said it was just him and his parents. I asked if he had any siblings. He told me he had a brother named Mitchell. So I was able to get Mitchell's contact information, and my plan was to start doing some secondary interviews to determine if anybody had seen part of
kitchen
Krista.
or
So you go
something like
interviewing the brother Mitchell and other people in the circle.
Correct.
During the course of this investigation, did you have any other direct contact with Mr.
that. I
Halderson?
like stuff like that.
Halderson is Chandler.
As in Chandler, I'm sorry, the defendant.
I was pretty much in his presence most of that afternoon and evening.
During the course of that afternoon and evening, did you observe Mr. Halderson using a vape pen at all?
Yes.
At some point did this investigation get turned over to detectives and your role kind of, you moved on to other cases?
We did contact our ISB, which is our detective division, as we felt that there was enough information now that there might be a reason to get detectives involved. So they were contacted that day. As far as getting involved in other cases, I pretty much stayed on this case all that day and all the next day.
Okay. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Deputy Nelson, you walked through the house, correct?
Yes,
You walked upstairs,
I walked upstairs to the top floor.
downstairs,
No, well, it depends. Downstairs being,
the second level that you were talking about.
so that day that I was there, the only floors I went to when you walk in would be what would be the living room, the kitchen, dining room, and then up to the second floor, which would be the bedrooms and I believe laundry room and bathroom.
But at some point, you did become familiar with the whole house
At some point that day, or it,
throughout the course of this investigation.
yes,
And they being the Haldersons, were doing renovations in that house, correct?
yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Any redirect?
Nothing
May
further.
this deputy be excused
The state has no problem with that.
and released from any subpoena further?
No objection from the state.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good rest of your day.
The state calls Joshua Seeley.
Prosecutor from the side looks like James Corden. He's just not as cheeky.
Deputy, good morning. If you are able to responsibly and safely testify without a mask, that would be my preference if you would. Thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Good morning. Please state and spell your name for us.
Josh Seeley,
Safely and
S-E-E-L-E-Y.
responsibly. No,
what
I'm
are you
gonna
doing, sir?
Deputy Sheriff. of Dane County.
sneeze all
How long
over
you
the
doing that?
place.
I've been a deputy for 20 years.
This past July, you were working at the sheriff's office, correct?
Correct.
Any particular role?
Currently, I perform full-time patrol duties for the Village of Windsor,
Tell me about that. Village of Windsor. First, let's start. I don't know where everybody's from. Where's the Village of Windsor?
just north of Madison and just south of
Windsor.
Village of DeForest.
And they don't have their own police department,
They do not.
and so they have a contract with the Dane County Sheriff's Office.
Correct.
What kind of things do you do as the guy who's assigned to be essentially their police officer?
The same thing most other police agencies would do. We provide daily patrol, call taking, other community services, blood drives, such stuff of that nature.
Where is your home base when you're over there? Do you have like a precinct you work out of, or how's that work?
So there's 2 facilities up in the Northeast area. We have a Dane County Sheriff's Office Northeast Precinct, and then we have our own PD, which is located right in the heart of the Village of Windsor.
I'm going to take you over to July 7th of 2021. That day, were you asked to respond over to the Northeast Precinct for someone referencing a missing persons complaint?
I did, yes.
Another deputy asked you
Yeah.
to come over.
Yep, I heard a radio call from Deputy Nelson stating that there was someone at the Northeast Precinct, what we would call a walk-in, and wanted to report a missing persons. So I responded up to the Northeast Precinct to make contact.
Are walk-ins common at the Northeast Precinct?
Not typically, no. Most people call.
This person didn't call.
They did not.
They did.
You went over there,
I did.
and tell me what you found when you got to the Northeast Precinct.
So I walked into the Northeast Precinct, what we would call the day room, where we have our desk and computers. And sitting at the table was a male who I later identified, Wisconsin driver's licenses, Chandler Halderson, and Deputy Nelson of the Dane County Sheriff's Office.
At this point, we're going to do an interesting procedure where everyone that's not in the jury is going to remove their mask for a second, and the judge is going to count to 3.
If everyone would do so, please. 1, 2, 3. Go right.
Do you see the person here in the courtroom who you identified with the driver's license as Mr. Halderson, Chandler Halderson, that day?
I do.
Tell me where he's sitting and what he's wearing.
He's sitting over at the desk to my right with a black tie.
That's the record reflect identification.
It shall.
What'd you do?
Asked him more or less what was going on, and he proceeded to tell me that he had not had contact with his parents, that they had gone up to their cabin
Touched your head,
up
Bobby.
north in Langley County, and he was.
Keep dropping stuff.
Did he give you any details at that time at the Northeast Precinct about who they were with?
He stated that he had left their residence, which is in the Village of Windsor, and had left with friends, and that they had gone up to this cabin to work on a fire pit and a water pump that might have been damaged during a storm.
Did he tell you at that time at the Northeast Precinct what car they were in? If you knew what car they were in?
He did not mention anything about a car, and he provided some names of people that he might have gone up there or that they have gone up there with, but he was not for sure who they had gone with.
After you take this initial statement at the Northeast Precinct, what do you do?
Initially, we released Chandler from the Northeast Precinct, had a conversation with Deputy Nelson, at which point then we drove down to the residence down on Oak Springs in the Village of Windsor, where we again made contact with Chandler.
Is that here in Dane County, Wisconsin?
And that's in the Dane County, yeah.
What was the purpose in going to the house?
Just to get a better overall picture of the whole situation. Some follow-up questions with Chandler, just to try and nail down as to why he felt his parents were missing.
You probably know this neighborhood as good as anyone being assigned there, but just tell us about that general area they live. What's it like?
It's very well kept, very quiet. It's a two-way street, and it is actually the type of street that has a tree growing out of the middle of it. That's so that the two lanes have to go out and around the street.
Aw.
And the Halderson home is on the middle of the block.
It's in the middle of the block on the north side of the road. Yep.
In general, the Halderson home is one of many homes in that area that's on a pond that's behind the house, correct?
Correct.
When you get to the house, did you go right in or did you stay outside and talk for a while?
We just briefly made contact with Chandler outside, at which point we were invited inside. And then we continued our conversation and interview inside the residence.
Sure. Where'd you go in the house when you first went in?
Immediately, just like in your standard entryway, open up to the living room and dining room area. At which point he asked us if we wanted to look around the house. When I said yes, I believe the first place he took me was upstairs. Went up the stairway, pointed out some bedrooms and another room that was off to the left, which I observed was under construction or renovation. So it was down to the studs and insulation. There was nothing else in there except some laundry machines.
Where'd you go next in the house?
After that, we went back down to the main living area, at which point he went partially downstairs. I did not go downstairs, but he did point out a set of couches that had been pushed together. And he stated that he had been sleeping down there because it was closer to a bathroom that was downstairs.
Let's talk about that for a second. The room in which the couches were pushed together, was that the room with the fireplace in it? One of the fireplaces?
I believe so, yes.
And you said they were pushed together. What do you mean by that, if you could describe it better?
So if you think of your average couch and how it looks, take another couch and push it up against it so it looks just like a square or a box. And that's what he was using as a bed, supposedly.
And he told you that was needed because it was close to the bathroom?
Correct.
Did Chandler tell you why it was important that he be close to the bathroom?
Just that the room that was upstairs and under construction was the other bathroom, and there was no functioning plumbing up there at that point, I guess.
Sure. Were you talking to Mr. Halderson around this time and kind of interviewing him further as he was showing you around the house?
I did. At one point, he did hold up a neck brace and said that was another reason why he'd been downstairs. But again, started asking him again about why he felt that his parents were missing. And he stated that he had attempted multiple phone calls to try and get a hold of him, and the phone had gone straight to voicemail.
Did you at some point attempt to call Bart and Krista Halderson using the numbers that Chandler was able to provide you?
I did. And again, my phone calls went right to voicemail as I tried to contact their phones.
All of these folks that you said Chandler gave a few names of people potentially that he thought his parents might be with, friends, things of that sort. Were those people contacted?
He was able to provide me with one phone number for the names that he provided me. And from that point on, we were able to get additional contact info from those people. So we started reaching out to them. I also asked about employment information for the two subjects, at which point he provided those. So again, we started reaching out to employers, all in attempts to try and get in contact with them.
At this point, maybe you'd call this kind of your standard missing person stuff.
Pretty standard, yeah.
Were any of those conversations with potential people that the Haldersons might be with fruitful? Meaning, did you learn that they were with any of those people?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled. You can answer.
From the contacts that were had while I was there, no one had contact with the two subjects.
When you were in the Halderson home, did he walk you down into the actual basement of the house?
I personally did not go into the basement, no.
Did Chandler make any comments to you about things his parents may have packed before going to the cabin?
He did. He stated that they had grabbed several bottles of liquor. He said the norm that they might take a bottle or two, which would include a bottle of wine. He then went on to tell me that his father had grabbed a large sum of cash, about $4,000, and this was also unusual, saying that they would only usually take a couple hundred, and that maybe they were going to a casino at this point.
Did he give you any time on when he thought his parents had left?
He was very specific and stated that they had left at 6 a.m., which I believe was on July 2nd.
6 a.m. on the Friday?
On Friday, yes.
Okay. Did he say that he saw them leave?
Specific.
He did not.
And at any point in your contact with Mr. Halderson, either at the precinct or at the home, was he actually wearing that neck brace that he showed you?
He was not wearing the neck brace, no.
What was his demeanor like as he was making these reports to you? How was he acting?
He seemed very matter of fact, just as you would be telling someone about your day. To me, there was no sense of urgency.
Did he cry at any point or anything like that?
He did not.
1 second, Deputy.
1 second.
Cross-examination?
Deputy Seeley, had you ever met Chandler Halderson before?
Not that I can recall, no.
That's all, thank you.
Any redirect? No. May this witness be excused from further testifying and his subpoena?
Yes.
Any objection?
No objection.
Thank you so much, Deputy. Have a good rest of your day.
Chandler so far.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Oh, I can hear you whispering.
Deputy, I would ask if you believe you can do so safely and responsibly that you testify without a mask.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Attorney Raymond.
Good morning. Could you please state your name for the record, spelling both your first and last names?
Deputy Haley Collins Lefevre, Hayley Collins -LA, capital FEVRE.
How are you employed?
I'm employed as a deputy sheriff with the Dane County Sheriff's Office.
And were you employed as such on July 7th, 2021?
Yes, I was.
And when did you first become involved in the Halderson case, the missing person case of Bart and Krista Halderson?
I had received some communication with my partner, Deputy Seeley, prior to the start of my shift on July 7th, stating that he requested that I respond to the Halderson home shortly after checking on. And that's how I became informed and notified of the call.
And about what time was that? Do you remember?
Shortly after 1 p.m.
And do you in fact go to the home?
I did go to the residence.
And on the Elmo, there's Exhibit 1. Was that the home that you went to, the Oak Springs address?
Yes, it is.
What'd you do once you got to the house?
I met Deputy Seeley outside on the front porch, and he just briefly summarized for me the information that he had already gathered.
Okay, then what'd you do?
Deputy Seeley took a phone call, and then at that point I went inside the home and was introduced to Chandler.
Okay, and the judge is going to ask everybody who's not a juror to remove their mask for 3 seconds.
If they would please, for the count of 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Do you recognize anyone in the courtroom as Chandler Halderson?
I do.
Okay. Could you please identify him by where he's seated and the color of his shirt?
He is seated at the defense table wearing a light purple shirt.
And did you end up talking with Mr. Halderson?
I did.
What, if anything, did Mr. Halderson tell you about his parents being missing?
Well, I was a little hesitant to ask a lot of follow-up questions because I knew Deputy Seeley had already asked him a lot. But in the small talk that we had, it began with me asking if his parents had had any medical issues.
Okay, and what did you learn?
He told me that his dad, his psoriasis had recently flared up, and he also needed stronger reading glasses. In regards to his mom, he said that the week prior, she had been diagnosed with skin cancer.
Okay. What did the defendant tell you next?
He had said, in regards to the skin cancer, I'd asked about how did his mom take that? What was her demeanor? And he said that she was very nonchalant about the diagnosis, that it had been, she had known about this for about 15 years, but the actual diagnosis had been just the week prior.
Why did you ask about those medical
Why do you
issues?
have gum,
Just to
lady?
determine if for their safety, if we should be doing a bit more on our end from a law enforcement standpoint. In addition to the skin cancer, he had mentioned that she had had a mini stroke a few years prior. And as a result, she had brain lesions, which now that she was experiencing frequent headaches and some forgetfulness and also a change in her speech. So we were also possibly concerned of a medical issue with Mrs. Halderson.
Sure. What did you do next?
Continued to speak with him, asked a variety of questions, again, just small talk and, again, not trying to maybe ask the same questions that Deputy Seeley had done, but continued small talk with Chandler.
At some point, does he talk to you about what his parents took to the cabin?
He did. He told me that he had helped his parents pack on Thursday, July 1st, and that they had packed their own bags for clothing, but he had helped his mom pack her medication, and had also packed for them some tools, also food, phone chargers, and then tools. And when I asked him specifically what tools he had helped pack for them, he said they were all for cabin repairs, and they included a wrench, a hatchet, a bow saw, some additional saw blades, as well as 2 10-gallon containers for gasoline.
Okay. Did he have any cash or that were packed?
Yeah, he told me that he was aware that his parents had taken a large sum of cash out of a safe. He did not disclose to me any sort of estimate as to the amount of cash, but that there was a large sum of cash taken from a safe that they took with them, and also a larger than normal amount of alcohol that they took also.
Did he elaborate on the need for the cash or the alcohol or anything else to the best of your recollection?
In regards to the cash, no, he did not know why they would have taken that much. As far as the alcohol, he assumed that given his mom's recent cancer diagnosis, that maybe she was a bit more stressed and overwhelmed, and that has led to more alcoholic drinking by his mom.
Who, if anyone, did Chandler Halderson say picked up his parents?
He claimed that he did not know the couple that picked them up. He said, and I asked a variety of ways multiple times, trying to determine if we could figure out who these people were. And he claimed that he had also asked his parents on Thursday the 1st who these friends were that he was going with, and they were not direct with him and never told him the friends that they were going up to the cabin with.
Did Chandler Halderson give you any information about the time his parents supposedly left to go to the cabin?
He did. He told me that he woke up at 6:15 a.m. on Friday the 2nd, and his parents were not home. So he told me that his estimated time frame that was when they left was somewhere between 4 a.m. and 6:15 a.m. When I asked him why he felt that was the time frame, he again reiterated that he had woken up at 6:15 and they weren't there, and that any time before 4 a.m. didn't seem like a realistic time frame that his parents would have gotten up to leave for the cabin.
Sure. What other sorts of information were you trying to learn at that point in time in talking with Chandler?
Again, just trying to, it seemed odd that there were a lot of details given for other things in regards to medical history and what he helped them pack, but in regards to them actually physically leaving and who they were with, there were not as many details, which seemed a bit unusual.
At any point, did you inquire as to what Bart and Krista Halderson typically wore as far as clothing?
I did. Again, if we were,
Why did you ask for that information?
again, if we were trying to potentially, of course, in a situation like this, our minds are kind of going all over the place and trying to think of all the possibilities and things that could have happened. So as a way for us to maybe more easily identify them or be able to pass information along to maybe other agencies or other resources to try and help them, wanted to be able to provide as much information as possible. And so I did ask if they are known to wear certain types of clothing on a fairly regular basis. And he said that his mom generally wears long sleeve shirts and baseball hats and would be wearing light blue Brooks brand shoes. And that his dad was likely wearing cargo shorts, also Brooks brand shoes, and t-shirts that generally have some sort of graphic or like a beer logo or something on them.
Were they described as cheesy dad joke t-shirts?
Yes, they were. Yes.
So you walked around the home. What, if anything, did you observe?
So it's a tri-level home where you walk in and it's the main level with a living room, dining area, and a kitchen. And there were blankets or canvas like over some of the furniture in the living room. Dining room table, lots of mail and things on the table. And the kitchen didn't seem to be anything overly glaring that would have.
Let's talk about that table. You said there was mail and things on it. Were there any like notes or instructions or anything that seemed to have been laid out?
Yes. Chandler had told me that he had a doctor's.
I think that officer's going to lead into something that's going to call for hearsay.
I don't know if I know enough about the question to rule.
I may have jumped in a little too much, but
Let me go ahead and have the question restated or stated as you asked it.
sure. What did you observe on the dining room table?
I observed several insurance cards that Chandler claimed were left out by his mom because he was going to be having, or had a couple days prior had told me that he had a doctor's appointment. And so his mom left the insurance cards out for him. There was also a note that he claimed was written by his mom saying,
Objection, hearsay.
As to the content of the note?
Correct.
Point we approach.
No. What kind of sidebar is that?
What has been marked as
Awful.
Would you please identify Exhibit 35?
Exhibit 35 is the note that I saw on the kitchen table. And based on Chandler's telling, this was his mom's note to him stating, "I hope your day goes really well," with a phone number for Pam saying just in case.
And it's in one of these fancy evidence bags. Is that fair, Exhibit 35?
Yes.
Saying it was collected by your department.
Yes,
So does this appear to be the actual note that you observed on the dining room table?
it appears it is. Yes.
I move Exhibit 35 into evidence at this time.
Any objection?
No objection.
It is received.
And permission to publish.
You may publish.
So there's this nice big, and we can open that later. Roughly does the note say, "Good morning, Chandler. Hope your day goes really well. Pam," and a phone number, and just in case, in a heart, just find you.
Yes.
Did Mr. Halderson give you any context of this note? Why would a 23-year-old, did you have any information as to why a 23-year-old was being left a neighbor's number?
Yes.
Objection. Speculation. Speculation.
Sorry.
Sorry, speculation and foundation. I can lay some foundation, that's fine.
Very good.
Deputy, did Chandler Halderson explain why this note was left to you?
Yes, he did.
Tell us, what was that reason?
He stated that a few weeks prior to our contact with him on the 7th, he had fallen downstairs in the and back of his head, which resulted in a concussion. And he said also a small hemorrhage in his brain. His mom was very concerned about leaving him alone for the weekend with no one else at the home to kind of care for him or make sure that he was okay. So he told me that this note was left with Pam's phone number to have Pam, or I'm sorry, for him to call Pam if he needed anything while they were gone over the weekend.
That was kind of a lot of information. I'm going to unpack it just a little bit. So Chandler Halderson told you he fell down the stairs a few weeks prior to you meeting him.
Yes, he did.
And he said he hit both the front and the back of his head during that fall.
Yes.
And therefore suffered a concussion.
That's what he told me.
And a hemorrhage.
Correct.
Did he tell you any other side effects or medical issues as a result of this fall?
Recall that he said he was having headaches and some tingling in his legs.
And that's the context in which he said his mother, or the reason his mother left Exhibit 35 in anticipation of the weekend.
Yes.
Did he tell you anything about any upcoming doctor's appointments or doctor's appointments that were scheduled to have occurred?
For himself, I believe it was for Monday the 5th. He had said he had a doctor's appointment scheduled. And then his mom also had an appointment on July 7th, which was also cause for concern for him because he claimed that she has now missed the appointment because she had not returned home.
During the course of your investigation, did Mr. Halderson present any proof or any evidence that he had been contacted by his parents since July 1st, 2021?
Yes, he had shown me a text message on his phone that he stated was from his mom, and he'd received that shortly after 11 a.m. on July 4th, and it stated something to the effect of, "We made it, we're going to a parade, and we will be home late Monday or early Tuesday."
And of course, you're meeting on a Wednesday.
Correct.
Mr. Halderson. At some point during the course of your part of the investigation, do you have Mr. Halderson fill out missing person certifications?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe what those are?
Yes, so in law enforcement, we have this form that we fill out for a missing persons report, and there's some criteria that need to be met. It can consist of someone who is physically or mentally disabled, someone under the age of 21 who we feel is in physical, they're in harm's way, someone who has been abducted or kidnapped, things like that. And Mr. Halderson was the one filling out the form stating that he was wanting to list his parents as missing, and it met criteria 6, which is that the person is over the age of 21, and they don't meet any of the above criteria, but there is reason to believe that their safety is in jeopardy.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 2. There's a front and a back, so I would ask that you observe both the front and back side.
Yes.
How would you describe Exhibit 2?
Exhibit 2 are the original copies of the missing persons forms, both filled out for Mr. Halderson and Mrs. Halderson. I signed the form as the witness for Mr. Halderson, and the form is signed by Detective Sims for Krista Halderson, and it's in a sealed evidence bag.
And did Chandler Halderson sign either or both of the forms of Exhibit 2?
He signed both forms.
I would move Exhibit 2 into evidence at this time.
Any objection? It is received.
So just briefly, because I don't expect you to memorize, on the date that they were reported missing, how old was Art Halderson?
Marked as 50 years old.
And how old was Krista Halderson?
53 years old.
And permission to publish Exhibit 2.
Yes.
Sorry, they do not teach us how to work these. But just briefly, Deputy, the first form is for Bart Halderson,
Yes.
and the signature on that is for Chandler Halderson, dated July 7th of 2021.
Yes.
And then the second form is for Krista Halderson,
Yes.
and again, signed and dated by Chandler Halderson on July 7th of 2021.
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
No questions, thank you.
May this witness be excused and released from her subpoena.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you so much, Deputy. Have a good remainder of your day.
I'm going to keep the deputy under subpoena. She's excused from now.
All right, very good.
At this point, the state will call Detective Brian Shunk.
Judge, can you switch it just to see if our computer
Can you
is
switch to
plugged
the
in?
computer will work? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
If you can turn it on the left. Is it on the left side? HDMI?
That's looking better.
All right. I think we're
Okay.
good.
Detective, thank you. You already removed your mask, and obviously, as I understand it, you may be visiting the witness stand more than once. So if you're willing and able to each time, that would be appreciated.
Good morning, sir. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Brian Shunk, Brian. Last name is Shunk.
And you're one of the lead case detectives in this case, aren't you?
Correct.
How long have you been a detective with the Dane County Sheriff's Department?
I've been with the department for approximately 13 years. I've been a detective for 2.
And who are you joined by as a co-lead detective in this case?
Detective Sabrina Sims.
You're the first detective to testify, and so you get the honor. But tell us what the difference, I suppose, in the work of a detective is from the work of just a normal sheriff's deputy who we've heard from so far.
Sure. Detectives are typically assigned more follow-up to initial reports. You know, we basically read all the reports for every case. We'll develop leads and then exhaust those leads, whether it's to approve or disprove a crime occurred, or whether a suspect, like I said, is proved or disproved to be the offender. As far as major cases go, kind of the same thing. Just keep on reading all the reports, developing leads, and following up on everything.
In some cases, you might be the only person working on an investigation as a detective, correct?
Correct.
That was not the case here, was it?
It was not.
Many people worked on this.
Many
case.
people.
Let's talk at first, just generally, about missing persons. You've investigated missing persons before, haven't you?
Yes.
That's something a police officer or a sheriff's deputy does normally.
Yes.
Fair to say you treat missing adults different than you do missing children.
There's similarities, but yes.
Adults, in many respects, if they want, can go missing, and there won't be a ton of police involvement as long as they're not, right?
Correct.
Where if it goes missing, sometimes they hit that Amber Alert button and they wake us all up at night.
Yes.
They don't do that for adults, really.
No.
When you're entering into a missing persons investigation involving adults, what kind of things are you doing? And not speaking
Silver
specifically about this
alert.
case, but in general, what are you doing as a detective in a missing persons investigation?
First thing, whoever the reporting party is, we want to talk to them and just see what background information they have as far as, you know, the days leading up to when they were last seen or heard from. We'll go back through and make contacts with any of the people that would have been in last contact, such as coworkers, employers, friends, family, and just basically develop a list of, you know, leads of who we can talk to, where they were last seen. We'll talk to banks, figure out if they've been spending any money. The list goes on.
Were you asked to perform some of that work on July 7th, 2021 regarding the missing persons of Krista and Bart Halderson in Windsor?
Yes.
How early did you get involved in the investigation? I think we heard that Chandler went into the sheriff's department about 11:30 that day. When were you first kind of involved?
I believe I was called around 1:30 p.m. and was at the Halderson home speaking with Chandler by 4:30.
So now we've heard from 3 people already. You're the 4th person to speak to Chandler that day?
I believe so.
Tell me where you speak to Chandler in the Halderson home. Where do you go?
So when I spoke with Chandler, we were sitting at the dining room table.
And what did he tell you?
Chandler told me much of the same as what we've already heard. His parents had gone missing after reportedly going to the cabin. Chandler said that he had helped them pack for the cabin on the evening of July 1st. He woke up at approximately 6:15 a.m. on July 2nd, the Friday, and they were already gone. He told me that he believed his parents were leaving with a couple of friends. He did not know who the friends were.
Did he tell you anything they took with them to the cabin?
Yes, Chandler told me that he had helped his parents pack tools, wrenches, pipe sealant, a hatchet, and 2 gas cans for the chainsaw. He also later told us that there was a bin in the garage for the cabin that they would take every time, and that bin was no longer in the garage, so they had taken that also.
Did Chandler mention if he had heard from his mom or his dad since July 1st? So he's talking on the 7th. Had he heard from him in that intervening period at all by text message or phone?
Yes, Chandler told me that he received a text message on Sunday, July 4th from his mother.
Did he show it to you? Did he show you that message?
Yes, he did.
I'm showing you what's been marked in this case is exhibit number 3. It's 2 pages. Can you show me what that is?
These are screenshots that Chandler had shown me that evening and then sent me.
And who are these communications purportedly with?
Chandler reported that those are his mother and him.
And move to admit exhibit 3 and publish.
Any objection? No. It is received, and it may be published.
Showing everyone exhibit 3 up on some of the photos, by the way, we're going to do this to make it easier to see. This machine over here doesn't work very well. In these messages, there are 2 colors, and the messages are on 2 sides. But fair to say that messages reportedly from Mom are on the left and from Chandler are on the right.
Correct.
Okay. Mom says, "Hope things are going well for you, thinking about you." And Chandler says, "Going well, thanks." She sends a smiley face. And then Chandler says, "Dad's phone died, call or text me, and get soda on your way home. I have an extra hour of work." And she says, "Kay, I can." All that sound right?
Yes.
And then we get up to Saturday, which would be July 3rd, 2021. Here's a Chandler sent a message to his mother. Hoping this goes through. I bet there's a lot of people up there making it hard to message, correct?
Yes.
And then I'm going to move to the next screen because the next message goes over both. And we're starting in the middle. Krista reportedly responds, "Made it safely. Can't get anything through. And yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. Will be home Monday. Night, Tuesday early. Love you lots." 2 exclamation points. Sound about right?
Correct.
And that was sent at 11:04 a.m. on Sunday, the 4th of July.
Yes.
And then lastly, Chandler texted his parents, texted his mom that day that he went to the police station. "Hey, I'm worried. I'm at the police station. Can you text or call?"
Yes.
These were the messages that you found on Chandler's phone?
Correct. He showed me.
You had an opportunity both then and at many, perhaps, occasions in this case to observe the Halderson home and be in the Halderson home and view it and tour it, correct?
Yes. Chandler showed us around the home July 7th.
Throughout the course of the investigation, you've seen inside and outside the home.
Yes.
And you've been in every room in the home.
Yes.
You're aware perhaps thousands of photographs taken of the home in the last 6-7 months, correct?
Several thousand.
I'm going to show you, not several thousand, but I'm going to show you exhibits 4 through 25. And if you could just briefly page through those, and the question is going to be, are those photos of the inside and the outside of the Halderson home? But we'll have you look through them first. So let me know when you're done.
Yes, those are all photos of the Halderson residence.
Move exhibits 4 through 25.
Any objection?
Thank you. No objections.
They are received. They may be published.
In fact, we're just talking. The mic's on here. We've been talking a lot about this house, and so I'm going to ask you to kind of give us a tour as we go through some of this, so everyone can put some context to what we're looking at. What are we looking at there?
That is the north side or the back side of the Halderson home.
Backyard, essentially.
Backyard.
Exhibit 5. What are we looking at there?
This is the pond located behind their home, taken from their backyard.
Exhibit number 6.
Same pond behind the home.
Exhibit 7.
This is going to be the garage door and then also another entry door into the home. Goes into like a little foyer. If you take a sharp left, it goes to the garage.
Got it. So there's an entry right there, and then there's another maybe traditional front door in the front of the house.
Correct.
Exhibit number 8. What are we looking at there?
This is going to be the what I would call main living room of the home, taken as if you had just walked in the front door of the home. You can see the kitchen to the left and the dining room to the right or center.
Furniture there with some sheets on it, right?
Correct.
Did you ask Chandler to put those sheets on the furniture?
I did not. They were covered when we arrived.
Showing you exhibit 9. What am I looking at there?
That's going to be the dining room table, and then the kitchen to the left.
When we talked earlier about that note from Ms. Sidwell, was that note found on that table?
Correct. It was on the table. I guess the upper left corner of the table is where it was located when Chandler showed it to myself.
Exhibit number 10.
This is Chandler's bedroom.
Now we're upstairs in the house.
Correct. Upstairs.
All the bedrooms are upstairs, right?
Yes.
Exhibit number 11.
Same. Chandler's bedroom.
Now exhibit 12.
This one is going to be the parents' bedroom, Bart and Krista.
At the time you arrived, had people been looking around the house at that point?
I was aware that a few deputies had been shown around the home. This was not the state that the parents' bedroom was in when I first saw it.
What state was it in when you first saw it?
I stood in the doorway as not to enter. The bed did not have any of those items on it. The end table, I believe, was a little bit more organized.
Fair to say this picture was taken partially during the police search, and so things are out.
This was taken before the actual search warrant was conducted. Chandler told me that he had pulled out some drawers looking for certain things that would help in the investigation.
Understood. Exhibit number 13.
This is going to be what I guess you can call the office level of the home, fireplace. And there was couches pushed together if you were to look to the left from this view.
And we're going to talk a little bit about Exhibit 13 later on, but just a quick question about this fireplace. Is there a pane of glass broken out of that fireplace?
Yes, there is.
So he used both fireplaces?
This is a different view looking over the table. Exhibit 14, looking back at the fireplace.
Yes.
What
And the
about
stairway
attic
there
got
goes up that half flight to the kitchen.
On the table,
burnt it there?
it was a box fan when you arrived, correct? Or a small fan.
Yes.
Exhibit 15, is this that couch pushed together thing we've been hearing about?
Yes, this is the same room. That door goes to the backyard, and then these are the couches that were pushed together that Chandler reportedly used as a fort, is what he called it.
And these are very close to that fireplace, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit number 16, just briefly, what are we looking at there?
This is going to be the shower, which is the only working bathroom in the house, on that same level as the couches we just looked at.
Now we're in the basement, correct, with Exhibit 17?
Yes, this is the storage area, the lower portion, the basement, south side of it.
As a sheriff's deputy for quite a while, I imagine you've searched quite a few homes, right?
Yes.
People keep their basements in an array of states.
Yes.
Was this on the more organized side or the less organized side of how people keep their basements?
I was impressed. This was organized.
Looking at exhibit number 18, what are we looking at there?
This is going to be the north side of the basement.
The basement, well, I don't have basement.
19?
It's not what
Same
mine looks
north
like.
side of the basement.
20?
This is a view from the north side of the basement looking back up the stairway. That stairway would go up to the level where the couch fort was. You can see the bottles of liquor there, along with some safes on the bottom center.
21?
This is a view of the storage area from the north side facing the south side.
That white thing in the middle, is that a chest freezer?
That is a chest freezer.
And when you were in the home, was that chest freezer empty?
The chest freezer was not in that location when I was there on July 7th speaking with Chandler.
Tell me about that.
When he was giving us the tour around the home, you know, we went upstairs, he showed us around, you know, we went in the living room, dining room, kitchen, down by the couches, and then ultimately down into this level. While we were down in this level, he kept the lights dim. We were on the north side first, and then we actually came over. I specifically remember looking at this location because just beyond where that freezer is, there's a cutout. Guesstimate would be 4x4 void, which I believe is under the front steps. That's beyond that, and then also the shelf to the behind the freezer there, the cleaning supplies. I just took note of, you know, all the cleaning supplies and toilet paper and whatnot. So that shelf was clearly visible. I was probably standing right where that freezer is.
So when you're on that, this picture's not taken on the 7th of July.
It is not.
But when you're in the basement staring at this location on July 7th, you're saying that freezer's not there.
It was not.
Do you have any recollection of where it was?
I do not recall seeing that freezer anywhere in the house.
Where was it?
At that initial time when you were doing the tour with Chandler and walking around, were you taking photographs at that time?
I personally was not.
Exhibit 22, what are we looking at there?
That is very
This is
organized.
the south side of the basement. You can see the utilities in the back.
Wow.
23, more the same?
Correct.
When you talk about organized, perhaps this is what you're talking about, these bins.
Yes.
Number 24, is that the stairs heading back up into the house?
Correct.
And lastly, number 25, what are we looking at there?
This is going to be a picture of the inside of the garage. The entry door back into the house is over by the trash bins that you can see on the left side. These two vehicles are Krista and Bart Halderson's. The Subaru was reportedly driven by Bart, and the Volvo was reportedly driven by Krista.
During your initial tour with Chandler, did he take you into the garage?
Ultimately, yes. He seemed hesitant at first, but then did allow us into the garage.
What do you mean by that?
He told us that that his two dogs were in the garage and that they were very skittish and would bark and jump on us.
But you were allowed in the garage?
Yes, he ultimately brought the dogs in from the garage and then let us out into the garage.
Did he point out anything in particular in the garage that was of interest to him or that he wanted you to know?
He did turn towards a storage shelf that's in the garage. He said that there was a bin missing that would be labeled cabin. So the bins that were on the storage shelf in the garage all had labels on them. At least I recall most, if not all, had labels on them. He said that one would have been taken to the cabin anytime they went, and that bin was missing.
I'll show you what's been marked in this case. It's exhibit 227. Tell me what that is.
That's the storage shelf I'm speaking of.
And Judge, if you want to switch to the Elmo, I'd appreciate it. And I'll move exhibit 227 into evidence.
Any objection? No, it is received. It may be published.
And just because we have a singular one out of order here, I'm going to show it on the screen. But there we go. We're looking at a shelf in the garage full of bins, right?
Correct.
And I'm pointing to a location where there's a missing bin. Is that where Mr. Halderson reported that there was a cabin bin missing?
That's where he pointed to, yes.
No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Not at this time, thank you.
Detective, you may be reseated back at council table, and I assume the state and the defense would agree this is a good time for a break for us. I'm often never upset if we go into the noon hour, because frankly, I think you run into less people with the food options if you're looking for food outside of the building.
Okay. Well, we are gonna end the first video here. So far so good. So interesting. And this trial is going to go on for about 10 days. So about 2 weeks. So not as long as I thought it was going to be. So not too bad. Not too bad at all. So I think I'll stick with it. Like I said, I don't necessarily go through all of everything, and obviously I fast forward through sidebars and jury instructions if they're super duper long. Unless I don't understand them, then I will listen to them and whatnot and try to cipher through them. But yeah, so interesting. Mr. Sir is charged with second-degree murder, or no, first-degree murder, intentional homicide, dismembering corpses and something else, and all kinds of bad things. Right now, they're just laying the foundation for things and getting all of the ducks in a row. It's kind of the boring work of the stuff before they get into anything else, which, you know, that's how it goes. But I think the next person to testify is his brother, if I'm not mistaken. That's what it says. Yeah, so we're gonna the next one is his brother, and then we have another detective and a supervisor of the defendants. So that'll be on the next go round. So yeah, but yeah, go ahead, hit that like, comment, subscribe, you know, do all of those YouTube things, and you know, keep on doing these little fun things and keep on going. But yeah, so we're gonna sign on out on this one and call just in this one, and then we'll get going on the next one. How's that sound? Good? Good. See you on the next one.